There is a profound, almost paralyzing weight in the simple act of standing still. When you are young, standing still feels like resting. It feels like a temporary pause in a life that stretches endlessly in every single direction. You look out at the horizon and you don't see a single path. You see a massive tangled web of infinite potential. You believe, with the absolute naive certainty of youth, that you have enough time to explore all of them. You think you can be the artist, and the engineer, and the traveler, and the quiet homebody. You think you can live in the bustling center of a massive city, and also have a quiet cabin in the woods. You believe that potential is something you accumulate, something you can hold on to forever without ever having to cash it in. But eventually, you reach a point where standing still is no longer an option. You reach a crossroads, and for the first time in your life, you are forced to confront the absolute devastating mathematics of human choice. Every choice is a quiet violence. We don't like to think of it that way. We are taught to view choices as acts of creation. We choose a university, we choose a career, we choose a partner, we choose a city to live in, and we celebrate these milestones as beautiful additions to our lives. We throw parties, we take photographs, we announce to the world that we have built something new. But what we rarely acknowledge, what we almost never hold a funeral for, is the destruction that happens in the exact same fraction of a second. Because to choose one path is to actively, permanently close the door on 100 other possible lives. When you stand at the crossroads and take a step to the right, you are not just walking toward a new future, you are simultaneously killing the version of yourself that would have walked to the left. That is the birth of the phantom. The phantom is the ghost of your own unlived potential. It is the echo of the person you could have been if you had made just one different decision on a random Tuesday 5 years ago. And the tragedy of the phantom is that it never truly goes away. It just walks parallel to you, separated by an invisible, impenetrable wall of reality, living out the life you walked away from. Think about the sheer volume of phantoms you have already created. There is a version of you that stayed in your hometown, who married your first love, who never experienced a specific heartbreak that hardened you, but who also never experienced the profound independence that saved you. There is a version of you who took that creative risk, who moved across the country with nothing but a suitcase, who failed miserably, but learned how to survive. There is a version of you who said exactly the right thing during an argument, instead of walking away in silence. Every time you make a definitive choice, you split the timeline. And the timeline you leave behind doesn't just disappear, it lingers in your peripheral vision. We grieve the loss of people in our lives because their absence leaves a physical void. We can point to the empty chair. We can look at the unread messages on our phones. We understand the mechanics of mourning a tangible loss. But how do you mourn something that never actually existed? How do you grieve a life that was only ever a possibility? It is a heavy, silent kind of grief because it has no socially acceptable outlet. You cannot cry over a phantom without feeling ungrateful for the reality you actually possess. If you are sitting in a comfortable home with people who love you, it feels like a betrayal to stare out the window and wonder what your life would have looked like if you had stayed completely alone. But the grief is real. It is the heavy, undeniable ache of knowing that you are finite. To be human is to be tragically limited by time and space. We are given this massive, expansive consciousness brain capable of dreaming up 1,000 different, beautiful ways to live. But we are trapped inside a physical body that can only occupy one coordinate at a time. We have the appetite for infinity, but we are given a terrifyingly limited budget of years. And so we must sacrifice. This is the hardest truth to swallow at the diverging path. You cannot have it all. The concept of having it all is a modern manufactured lie designed to keep you exhausted. It is a lie that tells you if you just work hard enough, if you just optimize your routine enough, you can simultaneously be the CEO and the perfect parent and the wildly adventurous traveler and the deeply serene meditator. But the reality of the crossroads is that every single path requires a toll. You cannot have the deep, stabilizing comfort of a long-term commitment without sacrificing the thrilling, chaotic freedom of the unknown. You cannot have the massive, worldly success of endless ambition without sacrificing the quiet, slow mornings of an ordinary life. You have to choose what you are willing to give up. And the panic sets in when you look down the path you have chosen and you realize you have no idea if it is the right one. We are obsessed with the idea of the right choice. We agonize over decisions, making lists of pros and cons, seeking advice from everyone we know, terrified that if we make the wrong turn, we will ruin the entire trajectory of our existence. We treat life like a standardized test, where there is only one correct answer, and if we bubble in the wrong circle, we fail. But there is no right choice. There is only the choice you make, and the reality you build in the aftermath of it. Every single path, no matter how beautiful, no matter how well planned, contains its own specific brand of suffering. If you choose a path of immense ambition, you will suffer the anxiety of the climb and the isolation of the summit. If you choose the path of quiet simplicity, you will suffer the occasional nagging wonder of what you could have achieved if you had pushed harder. There is no version of your life that is free from pain, free from doubt, or free from the ghost of the things you left behind. So why do we let the phantoms haunt us? Why do we let the unlived lives cast a shadow over the one we are actually living? Because the phantom life is flawless. The phantom life is flawless. The phantom life never has to deal with the messy, frustrating logistics of reality. In your mind, the version of you who took the other job is wildly successful, wealthy, and perfectly fulfilled. The version of you who moved to the other city is surrounded by beautiful friends and cinematic sunsets. We compare our actual, heavily flawed, utterly exhausting reality to a fictional, idealized movie playing in our heads. And reality will always lose that comparison. Reality has traffic jams. Reality has misunderstandings. Reality has mornings where you wake up feeling a deep, unexplainable sadness for absolutely no reason at all. The phantom life never has a bad morning. But the phantom life also isn't real. It is a projection. It is a defense mechanism against the terrifying vulnerability of being exactly where you are. It is so much easier to retreat into the comforting illusion of what could have been than it is to look around at your actual life and do the hard, unglamorous work of making peace with it. To stand at the diverging path and make a choice requires a profound, terrifying amount of courage, because you are willingly stepping into the unknown and you are willingly accepting the destruction of all the other possibilities. You have to look at the phantom, at the beautiful, shimmering ghost of the person you almost were, and you have to let them go. You have to accept that they were a beautiful idea, a wonderful concept, but they are not the truth. The truth is the dirt beneath your feet on the path you actually chose. The truth is the flawed, messy, deeply human life that you are currently navigating. When you finally realize that the sacrifice is the exact thing that gives the choice its value, the perspective shifts. The fact that you could have been anywhere else, with anyone else, doing anything else, but you are right here, that makes this exact moment incredibly sacred. You didn't stumble into this reality by accident. You carved it out of a block of infinite possibilities. You chipped away all the other lives until this was the only one left standing. And yes, the chipping away hurts. Yes, there are days when you will look at the marble on the floor and wonder if you cut away the wrong piece. You will wonder if you made a mistake at the last crossroads. But standing at the crossroads and refusing to move is the only real failure. To become paralyzed by the fear of missing out, to try to keep one foot on every single path, is to guarantee that you will never actually travel anywhere. You will just stand in the center, slowly being crushed by the weight of your own unresolved potential. So take the step. Make the quiet, violent choice to exist in one specific reality. Allow the other timelines to collapse. Allow the phantoms to fade into the background. They serve their purpose. They showed you what you valued, they showed you what you feared, and then they left you exactly where you needed to be. You are not mourning a lost life. You are simply acknowledging the immense, overwhelming scale of what it means to be alive. You are acknowledging that the universe is vast and your time is short. And out of all the infinite ways your story could have been written, it is being written exactly like this. And there is a quiet, enduring beauty in simply choosing to walk the path that is right in front of you, ghosts and all. We all share our lives with an invisible guest. If you pay close enough attention, you can feel them sitting just across the room. They don't make a sound, they don't cast a shadow, and they don't take up any physical space. Yet they are often the heaviest presence in our entire lives. They are the phantom roommate, and they are without a doubt the most exhausting person you will ever have to live with. The phantom roommate is the idealized fictional version of yourself who made all the right choices. They are the manifestation of every alternate timeline you ever considered but ultimately walked away from. They are the version of you who took that other job in the other city. They are the version of you who stayed in the relationship you knew you had to leave. They are the version of you who woke up earlier, worked harder, saved more money, and never made a single embarrassing mistake. And the cruelest part about the phantom roommate is that they are absolutely perfect when you are having a terrible morning, when you burn your coffee, when you are stuck in gridlock traffic, when you are feeling a deep, suffocating wave of anxiety about where your life is headed. You inevitably look over at the phantom roommate, and in your mind, they are having a beautiful morning. You imagine them waking up in a sunlit apartment in a city you never moved to. You imagine them walking effortlessly into a career you abandoned, completely fulfilled, completely at peace, completely unbothered by the heavy, messy reality that is currently dragging you down. We use this phantom as a metric for our own success. We constantly hold our actual lived experience up against the completely fabricated life of a ghost, and it is the most profoundly unfair comparison a human being can make. Because reality is inherently flawed. Reality requires maintenance. Reality involves fatigue, misunderstanding, physical pain, and a slow, inevitable decay of time. But the phantom life requires no maintenance. The version of you who stayed in that past relationship never has to deal with the actual exhausting arguments that drove you apart in the first place. When we look back at the people we left behind, nostalgia acts as a brilliant, incredibly manipulative film editor. It cuts out all the long, suffocating silences. It deletes the moments you felt entirely unseen. It erases the fundamental incompatibilities that made you pack your bags and walk out the door. Nostalgia only leaves the highlight reel. It leaves the late night laughter, the shared secrets, the warmth of a hand holding yours. And so, you imagine the phantom roommate living inside that highlight reel forever. You imagine that if you had just stayed, your life would be a continuous loop of those beautiful moments. You punish yourself for leaving, completely forgetting the desperate, heavy exhaustion that forced you to make the choice to begin with. You compare the lonely Tuesday night of your current reality to the cinematic, romanticized fiction of the phantom's Tuesday night. And in doing so, you rob your present moment of any chance it had to be beautiful. This is the great tragedy of carrying your potential around like a heavy stone. We are taught that potential is a beautiful thing. We are taught to constantly imagine what we could be, where we could go, and who we could love. But unreleased potential can quickly become a poison. If you are always living in the realm of what could be, you become completely blind to the profound, quiet miracle of what actually is. The phantom roommate thrives on your discontent. They feed on your what-ifs. Every time you question your current path, every time you stare blankly at the ceiling and wonder if you ruined your own life by making a wrong turn 5 years ago, you are paying rent to the phantom. You are giving them power. You are allowing a ghost to dictate the emotional temperature of your actual home. But I have learned that the deeper you look at the phantom, the more you realize how completely empty they are. They have no nervous system. They do not know what it feels like to cry until your chest physically aches, which means they also do not know the profound washing relief of waking up the next morning and realizing you survived it. They have no scars, which means they have no stories of healing. They have never failed, which means they possess absolutely no resilience. They are perfectly smooth, unblemished stone, completely untouched by the river of time. And some things in life are meant to be smooth, but a human soul is not one of them. The beauty of a human life is carved entirely by the friction of reality. The mistakes you made, the wrong turns you took, the people you loved who could not love you back. These are not errors in your code. They are the chisel. They are the exact specific forces that shape you into a deeply complex, capable, and empathetic person. The version of you who never made a mistake is a version of you who lacks all depth. When you finally realize this, the power dynamic in the room begins to shift. You stop looking at the phantom roommate with envy, and you start looking at them with a strange, quiet pity. Because, yes, they might have the perfect career in your imagination. They might have the perfect career in your imagination. They might have the perfect relationship. but they do not actually exist. They cannot feel the warmth of a coffee cup in their hands. They cannot feel the wind against their face on a cold morning. They cannot experience the sudden, unexpected joy of a stranger smiling at them on the street. They have perfection, but you have presence. And presence, no matter how painful or messy it might be, is infinitely more valuable than a perfect illusion. It takes an immense, radical amount of self-love to finally evict the phantom roommate. It requires you to sit down in the center of your deeply imperfect life, look around at the unfinished projects, the broken relationships, the lingering anxieties, and say, "This is mine." And it is enough. It means stopping the endless cycle of auditing your past choices. We spend so much energy trying to go back in time to audit the ledger of our lives, trying to figure out exactly where the math went wrong, trying to pinpoint the exact Tuesday where we supposedly strayed from the perfect path. But life is not a ledger to be balanced. It is a landscape to be walked. You have to forgive yourself for not knowing the things you only learn by making the wrong choice. You have to forgive the younger version of yourself who stood at the crossroads and made a decision based on survival or fear or a desperate need to be loved. They did the absolute best they could with the data they had at the time to look back now, armed with the wisdom of the future, and punish them for not choosing the phantom's path is a profound lack of grace. The greatest act of mercy you can offer yourself is to let the phantom fade, to watch them pack the bags and quietly walk out the door of your mind, to stop setting a place for them at the table, to realize that the space they were taking up in your head can now be filled with the actual, breathing reality of your present moment. And yes, the present moment might be entirely ordinary. It might consist of nothing more than washing the dishes, paying the bills, and going to sleep. But there is a sacred, beautiful weight to the ordinary when you are finally fully present for it. When you're no longer distracted by the ghost of what could have been, you suddenly have the bandwidth to notice the quiet miracles of what is. You notice the way the light filters through the blinds in the late afternoon. You notice the comforting rhythmic hum of the refrigerator. You notice the exact, specific sound of your best friend's laugh. These things are not grand. They are not cinematic. They will never make it into a highlight reel of massive, world-changing accomplishments. But they are real, and they are yours. And maybe the ultimate goal of growing older isn't to finally catch up to the phantom. Maybe it isn't to finally achieve the perfect, idealized life you dreamed up when you were young. Maybe maturity is simply learning how to lock the door behind the ghost, turn around, and finally feel completely at home in the beautiful, messy, deeply ordinary life you actually chose. Because a life doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. It just needs to be lived. And the phantom, for all the imaginary perfection, will never know what it feels like to truly live. But you do. And that in the end is the only timeline that actually matters. We are taught from a very early age to view our lives as a labyrinth. We are handed this grand invisible map by society, by our parents, by the culture we are raised in, and we are told that hidden somewhere deep within this maze is a singular, glowing center. That center represents our ultimate fulfillment. It represents the perfect career, the perfect partner, the perfect home, and the perfect unbroken sense of peace. We are led to believe that if we just navigate the corners correctly, if we just make the exact right sequence of left and right turns, we will inevitably arrive at this center and finally be allowed to rest. This is the myth of the right choice. It is the belief that life is essentially a massive, high-stakes multiple-choice exam, and the universe is sitting at a desk with an answer key, silently grading our performance. Every time we stand at a crossroads, we feel an overwhelming, suffocating pressure to guess the correct answer. Should I move to the new city, or should I stay where I am? Should I pursue the stable job, or should I follow the unpredictable creative passion? Should I hold on to this relationship, or is it time to let it go? We agonize over these decisions. We lie awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, trying to run incredibly complex mental simulations of futures that haven't even happened yet. We make endless lists of pros and cons. We seek advice from everyone we know, hoping that someone else might have a clearer view of the map, hoping that someone else might just point a finger and say, that way, that is the correct path. We become completely paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake. Because the myth of the right choice carries with it a terrifying shadow. the threat of the wrong choice. We are terrified that if we make one wrong turn, we will permanently derail our destiny. We're terrified that if we take the wrong job, we will miss out on the career we are actually meant to have. We fear that if we walk away from a relationship, we might have just accidentally discarded our one true soulmate, and we will be doomed to wander the outer edges of the labyrinth forever, entirely alone. But the deepest, most liberating secret of human existence is this: there is no answer key. There is no pre-written script. There is no singular glowing center of the maze. The universe is not grading you because the universe did not build a specific path for you to find. The path does not exist until you take this step. The illusion of the right choice is built on the false premise that meaning is something you discover. We act as though happiness and fulfillment are static objects hidden under a specific rock, and our only job is to turn over the correct rocks until we find them. But meaning is not discovered. Meaning is created. When you stand at a crossroads and choose a direction, you are not discovering your destiny. You are actively forging it. The path you choose becomes the right path precisely because you are the one walking it. You infuse it with your own specific resilience, your own unique perspective, and your own capacity to build something beautiful out of whatever raw materials you find along the way. I've learned that the deeper you look into the mechanics of choice, the more you realize that every single path, no matter how glamorous, no matter how safe, no matter how highly recommended by society, contains a duality. There is no path that is entirely composed of sunlight, and there is no path that is entirely consumed by the dark. If you choose the path of immense ambition, if you dedicate your life to climbing the highest mountains in your career and chasing extraordinary success, you will experience the breathtaking thrill of the summit. You will feel the rush of accomplishment, the pride of building something massive. But you will also have to carry the specific grief of that path. You will carry the exhaustion. You will carry the late nights, the stress that lives in your shoulders, the missed birthdays, and the quiet, heavy isolation that often accompanies the top of the mountain. If you choose the path of quiet simplicity, if you decide to prioritize a slow morning, a steady routine, and a small, deeply connected circle of friends, you will experience a profound, grounding peace. You will know the warmth of a life that is built on presence rather than performance. But you will also carry the specific grief of that path. You will occasionally have to wrestle with the ghost of ambition. You will have moments where you wonder if you could have done more, if you could have been larger, if you left a stone of potential unturned. Every choice is a package deal. You cannot selectively extract the joy from a decision and leave the struggle behind. And this is where the panic of the wrong choice begins to lose its power. When you finally accept the struggle is the universal constant, you stop trying to find the magical path that is completely devoid of pain. You stop trying to outsmart the universe. You realize that you cannot optimize your life to the point of escaping human suffering. Instead, the question changes. The question is no longer, which path is the correct one? The question becomes, which set of problems am I willing to solve? Which beautiful, messy reality am I willing to maintain? Which specific type of grief am I willing to carry in exchange for this specific type of joy? When you frame it that way, the heavy, paralyzing weight of decision-making begins to lift. You are no longer taking an exam with a hidden answer key. You are simply stepping into a garden and deciding which types of flowers you want to water, knowing full well that you will also have to pull the weeds that grow alongside them. The illusion of the right choice keeps us perpetually dissatisfied with the present moment. If we believe there was a perfect choice we missed, we will spend our entire lives looking backward, auditing our past, and resenting the very real, very beautiful life we are currently standing in. We will look at our ordinary Tuesday, our slightly messy house, our flawed but trying partner, our exhausting but necessary job, and we will view it as a failure. We will view it as the consolation prize for having failed the labyrinth. But this ordinary Tuesday is not a failure. It is simply the reality you built. And reality is always, unconditionally, more valuable than the perfect fantasy. Think about the sheer arrogance of believing we can predict exactly how a choice will unfold. We make decisions based on the data we have at 20 years old, or 25, or 30, and we expect that data to hold true for the rest of our lives. But we are constantly mutating. The person who made the choice 5 years ago is not the person who is dealing with the consequences today. You might make a choice that looks entirely wrong on paper. You might take a massive risk that spectacularly fails. You might enter a relationship that ends in profound heartbreak. Society might look at that chapter of your life and label it a mistake, a wrong turn in the maze. But that wrong turn might be the exact catalyst that breaks your ego wide open. It might be the exact failure that teaches you a level of empathy you never could have learned on the safe, comfortable path. It might force you to completely rebuild your foundation from the ground up, resulting in a version of yourself that is infinitely more grounded, infinitely more compassionate, and infinitely more capable of holding the heavy truths of the world. Can we really call a choice wrong if it eventually turns you into a softer, kinder human being? Can we really call a detour a mistake if it forces you to look at a part of the landscape you never would have seen from the highway? I think maturity is realizing that the destination was never the point. The center of the labyrinth is a myth designed to keep us running. The actual point of human existence is the walk in itself. It is the act of standing at the crossroads, feeling the terrifying weight of uncertainty, and choosing to take a step anyway. It is the courage to look at a blank map and say, I don't know exactly where this leads, but I'm going to trust my own ability to build a fire when it gets cold. I am going to trust my own ability to find the beauty in whichever landscape I end up in. We have to forgive ourselves for not being fortune tellers. We have to forgive ourselves for making choices based on survival or fear, or the desperate desire to just find a little bit of warmth in a cold world. You did not ruin your life by choosing the path you are on right now. You simply created it. And the life you have created, with all of its friction, all of its unfinished sentences, all of its quiet mornings and loud anxieties, is entirely valid. It is entirely yours. You do not need to constantly justify your current coordinates by proving that they are the absolute best coordinates you could have possibly reached. You are allowed to just be here. You are allowed to look around at the specific joy and the specific grief of your chosen path. Take a deep breath and finally stop searching for the answer key. Because the only correct answer was the fact that you survived the crossroads. The only perfect choice is the radical daily decision to embrace the reality you are actually standing in, and to let the illusion of the perfect path dissolve into the wind. There is a deeply human reflex to look over our shoulders the moment the ground beneath our feet begins to shake. When the present moment becomes too heavy, when the immediate future looks like a dense, impenetrable fog, we naturally crave the safety of the known. And the only thing we truly know, the only landscape we have fully mapped and survived, is the past. So, we turn around. We look in the rearview mirror of our lives, seeking comfort in the familiar shapes of the cities we used to live in, the people we used to love, and the versions of ourselves we used to be. Looking back is a survival mechanism. It is a way for the brain to temporarily escape the crushing, chaotic demands of right now by retreating into the quiet, settled dust of back then. But the rearview mirror is incredibly dangerous, because the rearview mirror does not show you the truth. It shows you a highly curated, deeply manipulated reflection, filtered through one of the most powerful and deceptive forces in the human psyche, nostalgia. Nostalgia is a beautiful, comforting liar. If you look at the origin of the word itself, nostalgia comes from two Greek roots, nostos, meaning return home, and algos, meaning pain. It is the literal suffering caused by the yearning to return to a place that you can never actually reach again, but the brain does not like to sit in pain. The brain is an engine designed to protect you. And so, over time, the brain begins to alter the data. It begins to rewrite the history of your own life. When you look back at a chapter you closed years ago, a past relationship, a former job, a group of friends, you drifted away from nostalgia. Acts as a brilliant, ruthless film editor. It sweeps through the timeline of your memories and starts cutting the tape. It deletes the long, agonizing nights where you cried on the bathroom floor. It cuts out the suffocating anxiety you felt on your morning commute. It completely erases the fundamental structural incompatibilities that made you feel entirely unseen by the person sleeping right next to you. Nostalgia takes the raw, messy, deeply uncomfortable reality of your past and scrubs it clean. It only leaves a golden hour lighting. It only leaves the highlight reel. It preserves the song of their laugh, the specific warmth of a summer evening in the city you left, the feeling of absolute invincibility on a night out with friends you no longer speak to. And then It hands this perfectly edited, completely fictional movie back to you and whispers, "Look at what you lost." This is the profound danger of living in the rearview mirror. You begin to compare the chaotic, unedited footage of your present moment to the beautifully curated highlight reel of your past. And it is a completely rigged game. Of course, the present feels harder. The present is happening in real time. The present has unwashed dishes in the sink, looming deadlines, quiet resentments, and terrifying uncertainties. The present requires actual physical and emotional labor. The past requires absolutely nothing from you because it has already been paid for. It is safe because it has already been survived. You know exactly how the story ends, which means there is no threat of the unknown. When we feel overwhelmed by the unknown future, we retreat into the safety of the edited past. We start to romanticize the very situations we fought so hard to escape. We start to wonder if we made a mistake by leaving. We scroll through old photographs. We listen to songs that transport us back to a specific year, and we let the heavy, sweet ache of nostalgia convince us that our best days are behind us. But I need you to remember something incredibly important. Something that the filter of nostalgia desperately wants you to forget. You left for a reason. You didn't pack your bags and walk out the door because everything was perfect. You didn't break your own heart and someone else's because the connection was flawless. You didn't leave that hometown or that job because you were completely fulfilled. You left because the walls were closing in. You left because the pain of staying had finally outweighed the terror of stepping into the unknown. When you sit in your present moment and romanticize the past, you are committing a profound act of betrayal against your former self. You are disrespecting the immense, staggering courage it took with that younger version of you to finally stand up and say, "I deserve more than this." Think about the version of you that had to make the incredibly difficult choice to walk away. Think about the fear they felt. Think about the tears they shed, the uncertainty they carried, and the sheer willpower it took to detach themselves from a situation that was slowly draining the life out of them. They went through all of that agony specifically to give you the chance to be where you are right now. To look back at the cage they broke you out of and say, "Maybe it wasn't so bad in there," is an insult to the work they did to set you free. The past was not a utopia. If it was a utopia, you never would have outgrown it. We confuse the feeling of familiarity with the feeling of belonging. Just because a place, a person, or a routine is deeply familiar to you does not mean it is where you are meant to stay. An old worn-out sweater might feel incredibly comforting to put on, but if it is 3 sizes too small, it will eventually cut off your circulation. You can love the memory of how it used to keep you warm, while also accepting that you can never wear it again, but we panic at the idea of letting go. We treat our memories like anchors. If you are navigating a ship through a violent, terrifying storm, dropping an anchor can save your life. It can keep you from crashing into the rocks. It stabilizes you when the world feels completely out of control. But if the storm passes and the water calms and you want to sail to a new shore, you have to pull the anchor back up. You cannot discover a new ocean if you are permanently tethered to the floor of the old one. Too many of us are trying to sail our ships with the anchor still down. We are trying to build new relationships while secretly comparing our new partner to the ghost of an old one. We are trying to build a new life in a new city while constantly checking the weather in the town we left behind. We are physically inhabiting the present, but our spiritual and emotional coordinates are permanently locked on a Tuesday in 2018. And the friction between where your body is and where your mind is will eventually tear you apart. You will spend your entire life tripping over the present moment because your eyes are completely glued to the rearview mirror. You will miss the subtle, quiet beauty of what is right in front of you. You will miss the person sitting across from you who is actually trying to love you in real time because you are too busy mourning a person who only knows how to love you in a memory. You will miss the profound, slow growth that is happening in your own soul because you are constantly measuring yourself against a younger, naive version of yourself who didn't know a fraction of what you know now. So how do we stop looking back? How do we break the spell of the beautifully edited highlight reel? You do it by bringing the pain back into the frame. When nostalgia tries to hand you the perfect golden hour photograph of the past, you have to force yourself to remember the cold, bitter reality of what happened immediately after the photo was taken. When you remember the warmth of their hands, force yourself to remember the coldness of their silence. When you remember the thrill of the old days, Force yourself to remember the deeply rooted anxiety that you are constantly trying to numb. You have to tell the whole truth about your history, not just the pretty parts. And once you tell the truth, you will realize that you don't actually want to go back. You just want the comfort of the known. You are just tired of the present being so demanding, but a demanding present is a living present. A messy, complicated, frustrating reality is a sign that you are actually in the arena, building something new, rather than sitting in the museum of your own history, staring at the artifacts of a life that is already over. The past is a beautiful place of reference. It is where you store your lessons. It is where you keep the foundational blueprints of who you are. You are allowed to visit it. You are allowed to walk through the halls of your memories, smile at the beautiful moments, and feel gratitude for the people who shaped you. But the past is not a place of residence. You cannot sleep there. You cannot build a home there. Yeah, and the past is completely stagnant. It has been breathed already. There is no oxygen left for you to grow. You have to put the mirror down. You have to turn your head forward. Look at the completely unedited, unscripted, terrifyingly open road in front of you and choose to drive. It takes a radical amount of trust to believe that the best days of your life are not the ones you have already lived, but the ones that are still waiting to be written. That the past be exactly what it is, finished. Forgive it for not lasting forever. Thank you for everything it taught you. And then gently, firmly, take your foot off the brake. The ghost is in the rear view. The timeline is sealed. The only direction left to travel is exactly where you are meant to go. There is a specific phrase that we offer to children as a compliment, completely unaware that we are actually handing them a life sentence. You have so much potential. When you are young, this phrase feels like a crown. It is handed to you by teachers, by parents, by adults who look at your early reading level, your quiet obedience, or your ability to solve puzzles, and they decide that you are somehow separate from the rest of the pack. They pin gold stars to your chest. They tell you that you are destined for extraordinary things. They look at your small, unformed life, and they project their own unfulfilled ambitions directly onto your shoulders. And you accept the crown because you are a child, and a child only knows how to seek love and approval. They learn very quickly that the easiest way to secure that love is to constantly exceed expectations. You become addicted to the applause. You become the gifted child, but no one ever warned you about the devastating psychological toll of being told you're special before you even know who you actually are. No one tells you that potential is not a gift. It is a debt. It is an invisible, suffocating debt that you owe to the universe, to your parents, and to society. And the older you get, the more the interest compounds. When you carry the label of potential, you are no longer allowed to just exist. Everything you do is measured against a completely fabricated, impossibly high ceiling. If a normal child gets a B on a test, it is a success. If the gifted child gets a B, it is a tragic failure of their potential. You are taught that your baseline is perfection, and anything less is an act of disappointment to everyone around you. So you build your entire identity around achievement. You build a heavy, rigid armor made entirely of academic validation, constant productivity, and the fear of letting people down. You learn to silence your own internal compass, what you actually want, what actually brings you joy, because it might conflict with what the world expects you to achieve. And then you grow up, you graduate, you step out of the highly structured, perfectly graded terrarium of the education system, and you enter the real world. And the real world does not care about your gold stars. The real world does not hand out syllabuses or rubrics. There is no final exam to ace. There's just an endless, chaotic expanse of adult life. The structure that you use to navigate your own self-worth completely dissolves overnight. You are suddenly just a person standing in a massive ocean of other people, realizing with absolute horror that you are not actually the main character of the universe. This is the great collapse of the gifted child. It hits you in your 20s or maybe your early 30s. The sudden, paralyzing realization that you are not going to be a prodigy anymore. You are not going to be the youngest person on a Forbes list. You are not going to fundamentally alter the course of human history. You are, in all likelihood, just going to be a normal, average human being with a normal, average life. And because you were raised to believe that being average was the ultimate failure, this realization feels like a death. You look at your life. Maybe you are working a corporate job, paying rent, going to the grocery store on Sundays, and you feel this profound, rotting sense of shame. You hear the echoes of your childhood teachers. She had so much potential. He could have been anything. You start to believe that you have squandered your gift. You start to view your ordinary life as a massive, unforgivable mistake. This is where the paralysis of choice sets in. When you are told you can do anything, choosing to do one thing feels like a catastrophic limitation. If you pick a career path that is too safe, you feel guilty for not utilizing your brilliance. If you pick a path that is highly ambitious, you are utterly terrified of failing. Because if the gifted kid fails, they lose the only identity they have ever known. So what do? You freeze. You become a chronic perfectionist who never actually finishes anything. You start 100 different projects but abandon them the moment they become difficult. Because trying and failing is significantly more painful than never trying at all. You can always comfort yourself with the illusion of your potential, as long as you never actually put it to the test. You sit in your apartment surrounded by half-read books, half-written ideas, and the crushing weight of a future you are too terrified to actually build. You become completely exhausted by your own mind. The spiritual fatigue of carrying unmet potential is one of the heaviest burdens a human being can endure. It drains the color out of your days. It makes you entirely incapable of being present. You cannot enjoy a simple dinner with friends because your brain is constantly running a background program, analyzing how far behind you are, calculating how much time you have left to prove that you are extraordinary. We live in a culture that completely monetizes and weaponizes this exhaustion. We are constantly fed stories of exceptionalism. The media only highlights the billionaires, the child stars, the revolutionary innovators. Society beats a relentless drum that says, you are meant for more. But what if you aren't? What if the most radical, rebellious, deeply healing thing you could possibly do is simply refuse to be extraordinary? I want you to think about the immense, terrifying freedom of taking off the crown. Imagine looking at the concept of your potential, acknowledging the massive, heavy stone it has become, and deliberately setting it down on the side of the road. Imagine saying to the universe, I resign. I no longer wish to be a prodigy. I no longer wish to be exceptional. I just want to be happy. The moment you give yourself permission to be beautifully, wonderfully average, the entire world opens up. When you are no longer trying to change the world, you finally have the bandwidth to actually live in it. You can pick up a hobby just because you enjoy it, completely free from the pressure of having to monetize it or become an expert at it. You can paint a terrible painting and love the act of painting it. You can write a poem that will never be published and feel profoundly moved by the ink on the page. You can take a job that simply pays the bills and allows you to leave at 5 o'clock, and you don't have to view it as a failure of your ambition. It is simply a tool that funds your actual life. We have completely forgotten that the baseline requirement for a successful human life is simply finding a sense of peace. You do not owe the world your brilliance. You do not owe your past teachers a spectacular success story. You do not owe your parents a trophy they can brag about at dinner parties. Your life is not a communal project. It belongs entirely to you. The curse of being gifted is the illusion that you are carrying a fragile, glowing orb that you must protect and polish at all costs. But the reality is that the orb is just a rock. It is just a normal human capacity to learn and grow. It was never meant to define you. It was never meant to crush you. When you finally let go of the need to be special, you realize that being normal is actually an incredible privilege. It means you get to experience the shared, universal rhythms of humanity. It means you get to fall in love, experience heartbreak, grieve, laugh, and grow old in the exact same messy, beautiful way that billions of other humans have done before you. You are not above the human condition, you are right in the center of it. And the center is exactly where the warmth is. So forgive yourself for not curing a disease. Forgive yourself for not writing the great American novel. Forgive yourself for waking up at 30 or 40 or 50 and realizing that your life looks remarkably similar to everyone else's. That is not a tragedy. That is an arrival. It is the beautiful, quiet arrival into your own humanity. You have finally exhausted the myth of your own exceptionalism. And in doing so, you have cleared the space to actually experience joy. You do not have to live up to your potential. You only have to live your life. And the very fact that you are here, breathing, feeling, and trying to navigate the complexities of this world with a soft heart is already more than enough. There is a sound that begins to play in the background of your mind the moment you cross the threshold into adulthood. It starts so quietly that you barely even notice it. You are young, the world is massive, and time feels like an infinite, overflowing river. But as the years pass, the sound grows louder. It becomes a steady, rhythmic, inescapable ticking. It is the sound of the societal clock, the invisible, completely fabricated timeline that dictates exactly where you are supposed to be, exactly what you are supposed to have achieved, and exactly how much time you have left to do it. We are born into a world that is obsessed with measurement. We measure our worth by our productivity, our success by our bank accounts, and our lives by a rigid set of arbitrary deadlines. We are handed a script before we even know how to read, and the script before we even know how to read. And the script is incredibly specific. By 22, you are supposed to have a degree and a clear, unwavering vision for your career. By 25, you are supposed to have secured a stable, upwardly mobile job and found a partner who makes sense on paper. By 30, the demands become suffocating. By 30, you are supposed to have the house, the marriage, the profound sense of internal peace, and a definitive, unshakable answer to the question, who are you? And if you miss a single one of these deadlines, the world makes sure that you feel it. Birthdays, which used to be these beautiful, innocent celebrations of simply being alive, suddenly transform into performance reviews. You wake up on the morning of your 25th or 30th birthday, and instead of feeling joy, you feel a deep, paralyzing wave of anxiety. You sit on the edge of your bed, look in the mirror, and run a ruthless audit of your entire existence. You look at the gap between where the timeline said you should be and the messy, uncertain reality of where you actually are. And in that gap, a very specific, very devastating kind of panic is born. It is the panic of feeling like you are fundamentally behind. You look around at your peers, and through the highly curated lens of the internet, it seems like everyone else was handed a completely different set of instructions. They are buying homes, they are getting promoted, they are announcing engagements. They are moving through the milestones with this effortless, defying grace. Meanwhile, you are sitting in your kitchen at 2 in the morning, staring at a blank wall, completely exhausted by the simple act of trying to survive a Tuesday. You start to believe that you missed the train. You start to believe that while everyone else was learning how to navigate the complex machinery of adult life, you were accidentally left in the waiting room. This feeling of being behind is one of the most universal yet deeply isolating experiences of the modern human condition. It makes you feel like an imposter in your own age bracket. You might technically be 30 years old, but inside, you still feel like a terrified 19-year-old who is just waiting for an actual adult to walk into the room and take the wheel. The weight of the timeline is heavy because it weaponizes time against you. Time goes from being a canvas that you get to paint on to a currency that you are rapidly running out of. When you feel like you are running out of time, you stop making decisions based on joy, and you start making decisions based on panic. You stay in relationships that are slowly draining the life out of you, simply because you are terrified of starting over at 28. You take jobs that you absolutely despise, simply because they offer the illusion of stability and allow you to check a box on the societal scorecard. You force yourself to hit the milestones, even if reaching those milestones completely destroys your mental health in the process. You compromise your actual authentic desires just to avoid the perceived humiliation of arriving late. But I need you to pause for a moment. I need you to step completely outside of the panic. Look at the timeline and ask yourself one incredibly important question. Who actually wrote the script? Or decided that human existence, which is arguably the most complex, chaotic, and beautifully unpredictable phenomenon in the universe, could be standardized into a neatly scheduled checklist? The timeline is a ghost. It is a complete and total fabrication. It is a construct built by an industrial society that values conformity and efficiency over actual human well-being. It is designed to keep you anxious because an anxious population is a compliant population. If you're constantly terrified of falling behind, you will keep running on the treadmill. You will keep buying the products, and you will never actually stop to question if the race is even worth running. But there is no universal race. There is no singular finish line. If you look outside your window, if you look at the natural world, you will not find a single living thing that operates on a rigid, universal timeline. A forest does not panic if one tree takes 10 years longer to reach the canopy than the tree planted directly next to it. Some flowers bloom violently in the very first weeks of spring, and some wait until the absolute dead of autumn to finally open their petals. Nature understands that growth is entirely dependent on the specific localized conditions of the organism. It depends on the soil, the shade, the water, and the unique genetic architecture of the seed. Nature never rushes, yet absolutely everything is accomplished. Why do we afford so much grace to a tree, but demand absolute synchronized perfection from a human being? You are not a machine on an assembly line. You are a deeply complex, highly sensitive ecosystem. You have survived specific traumas, you have carried specific griefs, and you have navigated a set of external circumstances that no one else on earth has ever had to navigate. To look at your messy, non-linear, deeply personal journey and compare it to the standardized timeline of a stranger is an act of violence against your own soul. You cannot be behind in the life that belongs exclusively to you. The concept of being behind implies that there is a set track and you have somehow fallen off it. But there is no track. There is only the wilderness of your own life. And you cannot be lost in the wilderness if you are the one drawing the map. I know people who found the absolute love of their life at 22, and I know people who spent their 20s in absolute heartbreak only to find profound, enduring love at 45. I know people who secured their dream career straight out of university, and I know people who completely reinvented themselves at 50, finally stepping into the work they were always meant to do. The people who hit the milestones later did not fail. They just had a different incubation period. They required more time to gather data, to learn who they actually were, and to build a foundation strong enough to hold the weight of their eventual arrival. Sometimes, the delay is exactly what saves you. If you had gotten exactly what you wanted exactly when the timeline said you should have it, you might not have been ready to keep it. The delayed timeline forces you to develop resilience. It forces you to develop empathy. It strips away the arrogance of youth and replaces it with the quiet, enduring strength of someone who knows how to survive the waiting room. When you finally realize that the societal clock is broken, the ticking in your mind simply stops. You experience this massive structural exhale. The panic drains out of your shoulders. You stop looking at the calendar as an enemy. You stop looking at your birthday as a deadline. You are allowed to be completely unfinished at 25. You are allowed to be deeply confused at 30. You are allowed to completely start over at 40. There's a profound, breathtaking freedom in accepting that you are not on a schedule. You do not have to have everything figured out by tomorrow morning. You do not have to apologize to anyone for taking a long way around. The scenic route is often the only route that actually teaches you anything worth knowing. So let them pass you. Let the people on the internet buy their houses and announce their perfectly timed life events. Wish them well. And then return entirely to the quiet, beautiful pacing of your own existence. You have an entire lifetime to become who you are meant to be. There's no rush. Take a deep breath, look at where your feet are planted right in this exact moment. Acknowledge the incredible amount of survival it took just to make it to this specific coordinate time. You are not late. You are not falling behind. You are exactly where you are supposed to be, moving at the exact speed your soul requires to heal, to learn, and to eventually arrive. And when you do finally arrive at your own milestones, they will mean infinitely more because you reach them on your own terms, completely free from the ghosts of the timeline. We are conditioned from birth to view human existence as a vertical trajectory. From the moment we can comprehend language, we are handed a map of the world that is oriented in only one acceptable direction, upward. We are taught that growth must always be synonymous with elevation. We must move up into the next grade. We must climb the corporate ladder. We must upgrade our living situations, elevate our social status, and constantly scale the jagged, endlessly rising mountain of our own ambitions. In our cultural vocabulary, up is the ultimate virtue. Down is a tragic failure, and still is nothing more than laziness. So we climb. We strap the heavy boots to our feet. We pull the weight of our potential onto our backs, and we start walking up the incline. And for a while, the climb is exhilarating. When you are young, the sheer exertion of energy feels like purpose. You have goals, you have milestones. And you have this burning, undeniable fire in your chest to prove to the world and to yourself that you are capable of reaching the summit. You put your head down, you sacrifice your sleep, you sacrifice your peace, and you grind through the fiction of the present moment because you believe with absolute certainty that there is a spectacular reward waiting for you at the top. You believe in the myth of the finish line. We all harbor this quiet, desperate fantasy that one day we will cross the magical threshold. We believe that once we finally secure the promotion, once we finally buy the house, once we finally see a specific number in our bank account or a specific ring on our finger, a bell will ring. The race will officially be over. The universe will hand us a certificate of completion, and we will finally be allowed to sit down, take a deep breath, and enjoy our lives. But the finish line is a mirage. It is the coolest, most elaborate optical illusion of the human condition. Think about the last time you achieved a massive goal. Think about a milestone you spent years agonizing over, something you poured your entire soul into reaching. Do you remember the exact moment you finally got it? Do you remember the profound washing relief, the incredible surge of dopamine, the beautiful fleeting realization that you actually pulled it off? How long did that feeling last? Did it last a month? A week? For most of us, the absolute joy of an accomplishment lasts for about 24 to 48 hours. And then, the world asks you the most devastating question in the English language. So, what's next? You haven't even had time to unpack your bags at the destination. You haven't even had time to let your nervous system register the fact that you survived the journey. And already, society's tapping its foot, pointing at a completely new, even taller mountain in the distance. The question, what's next, is not a harmless inquiry. It is a theft. It instantly invalidates the massive amount of work you just did to get exactly where you are. It reframes your brand new, beautiful present moment as nothing more than a temporary waiting room for the next achievement. And because we are addicted to the climb, we immediately start walking again. This is the hedonic treadmill. It is the psychological phenomenon where no matter what happens to you, no matter how much wealth you accumulate or how much success you achieve, your expectations completely adapt to your new reality, and your baseline level of happiness resets to zero. We treat our lives like consumer electronics. We are entirely obsessed with the upgrade. If you drive a 10-year-old car, you look at a brand new car and think, if I just had that, my commute would be peaceful. So you work for years, you save the money, and you buy the new car. And for the first week, it is glorious. The leather smells new. The engine is quiet. The technology is flawless. But 6 months later, it is no longer a miracle of modern engineering. It is just the metal box that takes you to work. You have completely adapted to the upgrade. And soon you find yourself sitting in traffic looking out the window at an even nicer car thinking, if I just had that. We do this with our careers. We do this with our homes. Tragically, we even do this with our relationships. We are perpetually convinced that the current version of our life is somehow defective and we just need to download the next patch. We need the 2.0 version of our existence to finally feel complete. But I want you to stop and really think about the sheer heartbreaking tragedy of the answered prayer. Look around at your life right now. I can guarantee you that you are currently in possession of things that the younger version of you used to desperately, fiercely pray for. Maybe it is the city you live in. Maybe it is the degree hanging on your wall. Maybe it is the fact that you can afford to go to the grocery store and put food in your cart without having to meticulously calculate the cost on a calculator before you reach the register. There was a time when the life you are living right this very second was the absolute dream. And yet, how often do you actually stop to touch those answered prayers? How often do you actively, consciously feel a gratitude for the things you used to cry over wanting? We don't, because our eyes are entirely fixed on the horizon. We are completely blind to the beauty of the altitude we have already reached, because we are so obsessed with the elevation we haven't conquered yet. And the result of this endless, unyielding forward momentum is a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. It is not just the physical fatigue of working long hours. It is a spiritual exhaustion. It is the heavy, dragging weight of never feeling like you are allowed to arrive. It is the anxiety of waking up every single morning and feeling like you have to justify your space on the earth by producing something, by improving something. by climbing just a little bit higher than you were yesterday. We use the phrase resting on your laurels as an insult. If someone achieves something great and then decides to just stop and enjoy it, we call them stagnant. We call them unmotivated. We accuse them of losing their edge. But what is the point of earning the laurels if you are never ever allowed to rest on them? What is the point of building a beautiful house if you never actually sit on the couch because you are too busy in the backyard trying to build an extension? What is the point of climbing the mountain if, when you finally reach the viewpoint, you refuse to look at the sunset because you are already charting the route to the next peak? The higher you climb, the thinner the air gets. The pursuit of extraordinary ambition is often a profoundly isolating experience. You spend so much time optimizing your routine, maximizing your productivity, and cutting out distractions, which are usually just the messy, beautiful, human parts of life that you eventually reach the summit, only to look around and realize that the top of the mountain is entirely barren. It is cold, it is quiet, and you are entirely alone. You look down at the valleys below. The valleys are chaotic. The valleys are filled with normal people living ordinary lives. They are not optimizing their sleep cycles. They are not trying to become industry leaders. They are just sitting on their porches, drinking cheap coffee, laughing with their neighbors and watching the grass grow, and standing at the freezing elevated peak of your own extraordinary ambition. You realize with a sinking heart that the warmth was in the valley the entire time. You spent your entire life trying to climb out of the very place where human connection actually thrives. The realization that the climb is a trap is one of the most terrifying, disorienting moments of a human life. Because if you stop climbing, who are you? If you remove ambitious from your identity, what is left beneath it? If you are not defined by the speed at which you are moving forward, how do you measure your worth? It takes a massive rebellious act of courage to step off the treadmill. It takes immense bravery to look at a society that is violently obsessed with upgrading and calmly say, no thank you, I have enough. To say I have enough is the ultimate act of defiance. It breaks the entire spell of consumerism. It short-circuits the timeline. It completely destroys the power that the phantom room may hold over you. Imagine the profound, washing relief of deciding that you have officially arrived. Imagine deciding that this specific job you have, even if it isn't perfect, is enough. Imagine deciding that this specific apartment you live in, even if it doesn't have the perfect view, is a beautiful home. Imagine deciding that the person you are right now, with all of your flaws, all of your unresolved anxieties, and all of your unpolished edges, is not a rough draft waiting to be edited, but a completely finished, entirely worthy human being. You do not have to keep upgrading. You are allowed to pitch a tent halfway up the mountain. You are allowed to look at the summit, acknowledge that you are physically capable of reaching it, and then actively choose not to, simply because you like the view from right where you are. You can let the hyper-ambitious climbers pass you by. You can watch them trudge upward into the thin air, carrying the crushing weight of their potential, while you stay behind, build a fire, and actually enjoy the warmth of the evening. We have to stop treating the present moment as a waiting room for the future. The life you have right now is not the prequel to your real life. This is it. This is the main event. The finish line does not exist. The horizon will always recede at the exact speed you walk toward it. You will never ever reach a point where everything is perfectly resolved and there's nothing left to desire. And once you accept that the destination is a mirage, you are finally free to just enjoy the walking. You are free to take off the heavy boots, sit in the grass, and let the exhausting, endless necessity of the climb fade away into the wind. There is a fundamental structural difference between being tired and being depleted. When you are physically tired, the cure is incredibly simple, even if it is hard to come by. You rest your body. You drink a glass of water, you close the curtains, you lie down in a dark room, and you allow the heavy machinery of your physical form to power down for the night. And when you wake up the next morning, the exhaustion is gone. The physical battery has recharged. You stretch your arms, you step out of bed, and you are ready to engage with the world again. But what happens when you wake up after 8 or 9 hours of perfectly uninterrupted sleep? You open your eyes to the morning light, and before you have even thrown off the covers, you feel a massive, crushing weight sitting directly on your chest. You look at the ceiling, and the simple thought of having to get up, make coffee, and participate in another day of human existence feels like an impossibly heavy physical labor. You are not physically tired. Your muscles are rested. Your heart is beating normally, but you are entirely, completely empty. This is not a failure of the body. It is a burnout of the soul. We live in a world that completely misunderstands the concept of exhaustion because we only measure it in terms of physical output or hours worked. We look at someone who is working 80 hours a week at a high-stress corporate job, and we easily validate their burnout. We say, of course you are exhausted. Look at how much you are producing. But spiritual exhaustion does not require a massive workload. You can be deeply, profoundly burned out while working a standard 40-hour week. You can be burned out while sitting in a perfectly comfortable home. You can be burned out while technically doing everything right, because the burnout of the soul does not come from doing too much physical labor. It comes from the relentless, unending psychological labor of having to perform your own existence. From the moment we step out of our front doors, and increasingly from the moment we open our phones in the safety of our own beds, we are stepping onto a stage. We are constantly performing for an invisible audience. We perform competence at our jobs, nodding along in meetings, pretending that we care deeply about quarterly metrics and synergy when all we really want to do is go home and look at the sky. We perform happiness for our friends and family, smiling through our anxiety because we don't want to be a burden. We perform wellness on the internet, curating a digital museum of our best moments, our healthiest meals, our most aesthetically pleasing vacations, completely terrified that if we drop the mask for even a second, the world will realize how messy and frightened we actually are. This constant high-definition performance requires a staggering amount of spiritual bandwidth. You are constantly running a translation software in your brain. You have a raw, authentic feeling. Maybe it's sadness, maybe it's anger, maybe it's just a deep, lingering apathy, but you know that raw feeling is not socially acceptable. So, you compress the file, you translate it, you smile, you say, I'm just a little tired today, instead of saying, I feel like I am slowly disappearing into the background of my own life. And every time you translate yourself, every time you swallow your actual truths to make the people around you more comfortable, you chip away a tiny piece of your soul. Over time, those tiny chips add up to a massive gaping void. The most terrifying symptom of soul burnout is not sadness. Sadness is an active emotion. Sadness means you still care. Sadness means your heart is still registering the pain of the world. The true symptom of a burnout soul is numbness. It is the slow, terrifying realization that the color is draining out of your life. Things that used to bring you profound joy suddenly feel completely flat. You listen to your favorite song, a song that used to make your chest ache with how beautiful it was, and you feel absolutely nothing. You sit across from a person you love deeply, and you logically know that you love them, but you cannot actually bridge the emotional gap to feel the warmth of their presence. You feel like a ghost haunting your own routine. You're going through the motions, walking the dog, paying the bills, doing the laundry, but there's nobody actually home behind your eyes. And how does society tell us to cure this profound existential numbness? Society hands us the exact same poison that made us sick in the first place. We are told that the cure for our spiritual exhaustion is more optimization. If you are feeling burned out, society says you just need a better morning routine. You need to wake up at 5 a.m., drink a mathematically perfect smoothie, meditate for exactly 20 minutes using an app that tracks your breathing, journal your gratitude, and plunge yourself into freezing cold water. We have completely weaponized the concept of self-care. We have turned rest into another task on our to-do list. We have turned healing into a performance. Even our hobbies are no longer safe. There was a time when the human being could just do something purely for the sake of doing it. But the modern world cannot tolerate anything that does not produce a measurable output. If you like to bake bread, someone will immediately tell you that you should start a micro bakery. If you like to knit, you should open an online shop. If you write, you should be building a brand. We are taught to monetize our joy until there's absolutely no joy left. We are taught to harvest every single square inch of our internal garden, completely stripping the soil of its nutrients, until the earth is entirely barren and nothing will ever grow there again. When you optimize every single second of your life for maximum productivity, you are effectively telling your soul that it has no intrinsic value. You are telling yourself that you only matter if you are useful. But you are a human being, not a human doing. The cure for a burned out soul is not a more optimized routine. The cure is not a green juice or a productivity app or a side hustle. cures radical, unapologetic uselessness. It's the courage to intentionally carve out spaces in your life where you produce absolutely nothing, where you do not advance your career, where you do not improve your physique, where you do not learn a new language or read a self-help book. It is the terrifying, beautiful act of just sitting still and allowing yourself to be entirely unmarketable. Imagine spending an entire Sunday doing absolutely nothing of value. You don't clean the house, you don't reply to emails, you just sit on the floor and listen to an entire album from front to back without simultaneously scrolling on your phone. You walk to a park not to achieve your 10,000 steps, not to burn calories, but simply to watch the way the wind moves through the branches of the trees. At first, this will feel incredibly uncomfortable. When you have spent your entire life running on the treadmill of productivity, stepping off feels like a moral failure. The invisible audience in your head will start screaming at you. The phantom roommate will cross their arms and tell you that you are wasting time, that you are falling behind, that you are being lazy. The anxiety will spike because the numbness of burnout is actually a defense mechanism. It is your brain's way of protecting you from the overwhelming grief of realizing how much of your life you have spent performing for people who don't actually care about you. When you sit in the silence, when you finally stop moving, the numbness will begin to crack. And what comes rushing through those cracks is usually a massive wave of unprocessed emotion. You might cry, you might feel a deep, heavy wave of anger at the years you spent twisting yourself into knots just to be perceived as successful. But you have to let that wave wash over you. You have to sit in the uselessness until the panic subsides. Because beneath the panic, beneath the grief, is the very beginning of a heartbeat. It is the slow, quiet return of your actual self. The part of you that does not care about resumes or algorithms or the societal timeline. The part of you that just wants to feel the sun on your skin and eat a good meal with someone you love. We have to stop treating our souls like engines that can be constantly run on fumes. An engine does not need to be loved. It just needs to be fueled and maintained. But a soul requires a completely different kind of nourishment. It requires play. It requires art that has no commercial value. It requires the deep, uninterrupted silence of a room where nothing is expected of you. If you are feeling the heavy gray weight of spiritual exhaustion today, I need you to know that you are not broken. You are not failing at life. You are simply experiencing the natural consequence of trying to survive in a world that treats human beings like inventory. Your burnout is a completely sane, healthy response to an insane, unhealthy system. It is your body and your spirit staging a massive, unified protest. It is your soul pulling the emergency brake and refusing to take another step on a path that is leading you away from your own heart. Listen to the protest. Respect the absolute refusal of your spirit to continue performing. Take off the heavy armor of your potential. Take off the mask of constant competence. Give yourself permission to be beautifully, wonderfully unproductive. Let the soil of your life lie fallow for a season. Let the weeds grow. Let the rain fall. You do not need to constantly harvest. Sometimes the most important work you can do is simply to rest the earth, trust the quiet dark, and wait patiently for the color to naturally return to the world. If you are riding a high-speed train that has been hurling down the tracks at 200 miles an hour for your entire life, and someone suddenly pulls the emergency brake, the train does not stop peacefully. It screeches. The metal grinds against the rails, the sparks fly, and every single piece of luggage inside the cabins goes violently flying forward. The physical engine might have ceased accelerating, but the momentum is still carrying the massive weight of the machine forward. This is the exact physics of the human nervous system when you finally try to stop. We have this beautiful, completely naive fantasy about what it means to finally take a break. We imagine that the moment we decide to step off the treadmill, we will instantly be washed in a profound golden light of absolute peace. We think we will sit on our couches, sip a cup of tea, and immediately feel the serenity of a monk. But the reality of the pause is entirely different. When you first give yourself permission to stop, it does not feel like peace. It feels like a crash. Because your brain and your body have been running on the high-octane fuel of stress, anxiety, and ambition for years, you are chemically addicted to your own panic. If you have spent the last decade believing that your worth is tied to your momentum, Suddenly stopping feels like an existential threat. The moment you sit down on the couch on a Tuesday afternoon and do absolutely nothing, the momentum of your life goes violently flying forward. Your heart races. Your mind starts generating a frantic scrolling list of everything you should be doing. The phantom roommate steps into the room, looks at you sitting there in the quiet, and begins to whisper, "You are wasting time. You are falling behind. Everyone else is still running. If you don't get up right now, you are going to lose everything." This initial wave of guilt is the threshold you have to cross. It is the withdrawal symptom of a society that has commodified human existence. We are taught that rest is a transaction. We are taught that rest is something you must ruthlessly earn through extreme suffering and exhaustion. You are allowed to rest on the weekend, but only if you destroyed yourself Monday through Friday. You are allowed to take a vacation, but only if you worked yourself to the absolute bone for 50 weeks prior. We view rest as the reward for productivity, rather than a fundamental, non-negotiable biological requirement for simply being alive. So, when you try to pause without having earned it in the eyes of the societal timeline, the guilt is paralyzing. You feel like a thief. You feel like you are stealing time that doesn't belong to you. But I need you to understand something incredibly important. You do not have to earn the right to exist in a state of rest. You do not have to justify your breathing. You do not have to pay rent to the universe for occupying space on a quiet afternoon. The trees outside your window do not apologize for standing still. The ocean does not feel guilty when the tide goes out and the water becomes completely glass flat. The natural world understands that the pause is just as vital as the storm, but we resist the pause because we are terrified of what we might hear when the noise finally stops. When you are constantly running, constantly climbing, constantly distracted by the chaotic machinery of your ambition, you never have to actually sit alone in a room with yourself. You never have to confront the quiet, heavy questions that live in the center of your chest. Am I actually happy? Do I even like the life I am building? Who am I if I am not performing for an audience? The noise of the climb is a brilliant defense mechanism against the terrifying vulnerability of self-reflection. When you hit the brakes, the silence that fills the room is deafening. And in that silence, you are forced to look in the mirror and meet the person you have become while you are busy trying to become someone else. That meeting is incredibly uncomfortable. You might realize that you don't even know the stranger looking back at you. You might realize that you have spent the last 5 years building a life for a version of yourself that no longer exists. This is why people get off the couch and get right back on the treadmill. It is easier to keep running in the wrong direction than it is to stop, look around, and admit that you are completely lost. But if you can just push through that initial panic, if you can sit on the couch, feel the guilt, feel the anxiety, feel the sheer terror of the silence, and choose not to move, something miraculous happens. The momentum eventually bleeds out. The spinning room begins to slow down. The frantic heartbeat begins to settle into a steady, quiet rhythm. The phantom roommate eventually gets bored of yelling at you and slowly fades out of the room. And then, for the very first time in years, you actually arrive in the present moment. You look out the window and you realize that the sky hasn't fallen just because you stopped holding it up. The world is still spinning. The sun is still setting. The absolute staggering arrogance of our anxiety is the belief that if we stop worrying, if we stop running, the entire universe will collapse. But it doesn't. The universe is completely indifferent to your ambition, and that indifference is the most liberating truth you can possibly discover. When you realize that your constant forward motion is not actually required to keep the world turning, you are finally free to just be a passenger. You are free to look around at your actual, physical surroundings. You notice the dust motes floating in the shaft of afternoon sunlight. You notice the way the fabric of the couch feels against your hand. You hear the distant, muffled sound of a neighbor's dog barking or a car driving down the street. These are the microscopic, deeply ordinary details of a human life that you completely miss when you are hurtling down the tracks at 200 miles an hour. This is what happens when you grant yourself permission to pause. You regain your vision. You stop seeing your life as a series of obstacles to overcome or milestones to achieve, and you start seeing it as an environment to inhabit. The profound beauty of the pause is that it reconnects you with the physical reality of your own body. For so long, you have treated your body as nothing more than a vehicle to transport your brain from one stressful meeting to the next. You have treated it like a machine that requires fuel and occasional maintenance just so it can keep producing output. But in the pause, you realize that your body is the only true home you will ever have. It is where you experience the warmth of a good meal. It is where you feel the profound comfort of a heavy blanket on a cold night. It is where you hold the people you love. When you stop trying to escape the present moment, you realize that the present moment is actually a very safe place to be. It is the radical act of saying, right here, right now, there is nothing I need to fix. There is nothing I need to improve. There is nowhere else I need to be. It is incredibly difficult to say those words and actually believe them. We are so conditioned to look for the flaw, to look for the next problem to solve. But I want you to practice it. I want you to look around your room today. It doesn't matter if it's messy. It doesn't matter if there are dishes in the sink or laundry on the chair. Look at the space you occupy. Take a deep breath and whisper the words out loud. I am allowed to just be here. Give yourself the explicit verbal permission to step off the track, because nobody else is going to give it to you. The world will never write you a permission slip to rest. The culture will never send you an email telling you that you have finally done enough and you can go home now. If you wait for society to tell you that you are allowed to pause, you will wait until you are in your grave. You have to be the one to pull the emergency brake. You have to be the one to claim the quiet afternoon. You have to be the one to aggressively defend your own peace against a world that wants to harvest every single second of your time. And when you finally do, when the sparks stop flying, when the luggage settles, when the screeching of the metal completely fades into silence, you will find something waiting for you that is infinitely more valuable than any promotion, any achievement, or any perfect timeline. You will find yourself. You will find the quiet, breathing, deeply human core of who you actually are. You will find the version of you that simply loves to exist. The version of you that finds joy in the ordinary. The version of you that doesn't need to be extraordinary to be worthy of love. The pause is not a failure of momentum. It is the beginning of presence. And presence is the only place where an actual, beautiful life can ever be lived. When you finally step off the treadmill of your own ambition, when the deafening noise of the endless climb fades away and the dust completely settles, you are left standing in the absolute center of your actual life. And for the first few days, the silence is terrifying. You look around, stripped of your momentum, stripped of your frantic need to achieve, and you are forced to confront the stark, unedited reality of your physical surroundings. There is no grand audience cheering for you. There is no monumental milestone waiting to be crossed before dinner. There is just the kitchen counter, the hum of the refrigerator, a stack of unopened mail, and the quiet, heavy realization that the vast majority of human existence consists of absolutely nothing spectacular. We are not prepared for the mundanity of survival. We are raised on a diet of cinematic narratives. We watch movies, read books, and consume media that compress entire lifetimes into a 2-hour highlight reel. In the movies, they skip the commute. They skip the 3 hours spent doing laundry on a Sunday. They cut directly from the grand romantic gesture to the happily ever after, completely omitting the thousands of quiet, boring Tuesday nights that actually make up a marriage. Because of this, we are conditioned to view our own lives as a movie that is constantly stolen. We view the spaces in between the massive milestones as dead space. We treat the ordinary, repetitive tasks of maintaining our existence as deeply annoying obstacles that are standing in the way of our real life. We think, once I finish these dishes, once I get through this awful commute, once I finally organize this closet, then I can sit down and actually enjoy my life. We spend decades trying to rush through the maintenance, completely blind to the devastating truth that the maintenance is the life. There's a profound, almost tragic irony in the way we desperately chase the extraordinary, while completely taking for granted the breathtaking miracle of the ordinary. We want fireworks. We want massive world-altering passion. We want to stand on the summit of a mountain and scream our names into the void. But if you were to ask someone at the very end of their life, someone who is lying in a hospital bed, watching the clock run out on their time on this earth, what they want most, they will never ask for the fireworks. They ask for the Tuesday. They ask for the quiet, unremarkable morning. They want the feeling of walking into a warm kitchen and hearing the sound of water boiling on the stove. They want the specific, comforting smell of coffee grounds. They want the mundane, deeply grounding feeling of folding warm laundry with someone they love. When your time is running out, you do not crave the extraordinary. You crave the ordinary because you finally realize that the ordinary was the only thing that was actually real. The architecture of a good life is not built with the expensive marble of massive achievements. It is built with the heavy, unglamorous, entirely uncelebrated bricks of daily routine. I want you to think about the simple act of boiling water in our hyper-optimized, constantly rushing society. Making a cup of tea or coffee is just a means to an end. It is a vehicle for caffeine. It is a chore we rush through while simultaneously checking our emails on our phones, entirely disconnected from the physical reality of what we are doing. We are physically in the kitchen, but our minds are completely trapped in the future, worrying about a meeting that doesn't happen for another 3 hours. But what if you didn't rush? What if you chose to actually be present for the maintenance of your own life? Imagine walking into the kitchen and consciously deciding to inhabit your physical body. You feel the kettle. You feel the weight of the water in your hands. You listen to the sharp, distinct click of the stove igniting, and you watch the blue flame flare to life against the metal. You stand there, completely still, and you just wait. You listen to the low rumbling hum of the water as it begins to boil. You watch the steam rise and curl into the morning air, catching the light from the window. In that exact moment, you are not trying to change the world. You are not trying to prove your worth to an invisible audience. You are simply a human being standing in a quiet room, tending to your own survival. There's a profound, unshakable dignity in that. When you learn to anchor yourself in the sensory details of the mundane, the heavy, existential dread of the modern world begins to lose its grip on you. Anxiety cannot survive in the present moment. Anxiety requires a future to worry about, or a past to regret. But if your entire consciousness is focused on the warmth of a ceramic mug against your palms, there is no room left for the timeline, the phantom roommate, or the societal pressure to be exceptional. This is the hidden romance of the ordinary. It is the realization that the things we view as chores are actually the beautiful rhythmic anchors that keep us tethered to the earth. Take the morning commute. For most of us, the commute is a source of immense frustration. It is gridlock traffic. It is crowded trains. It is a daily exhausting reminder of the rat race. We put our headphones on, we stare at our screens, and we do everything in our power to completely disassociate from the experience of moving from point A to point B. But the commute is the ultimate shared human experience. If you take your headphones out and just look out the window of a train, or look at the car stopped at a red light next to you, you are witnessing the absolute heartbreaking poetry of the human condition. Every single person in every single car is carrying an entire universe inside their head. The woman in the car next to you, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel, might be driving to the hospital to say goodbye to a parent. The young man on the train, staring blankly at the floor, might have just fallen in love for the very first time. The tired mother carrying groceries might be holding the entire structural integrity of her family together by a single fraying thread, and all of you, with your massive, overwhelming griefs and your quiet, private joys, are simply sitting in traffic together, waiting for the light to turn green. There's a deep, overwhelming empathy that washes over you when you finally stop viewing the people around you as obstacles in your path, and stop viewing them as fellow passengers in the beautiful, tragic, perfectly ordinary maintenance of life. We're all just trying to get home. We're all just trying to keep the lights on, feed the people we love, and find a tiny sliver of peace before we have to wake up and do it all over again tomorrow. The repetition of life is not a prison sentence. It is a heartbeat. Chop wood, carry water. It is an ancient Zen proverb that speaks to the core of spiritual enlightenment. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The tasks do not change. The laundry will always need to be folded. The dishes will always need to be washed. The commute will always have to be driven. The external mechanics of your life do not suddenly transform into a glamorous cinematic montage just because you have found inner peace. What changes is you. What changes is your internal posture toward the tasks. You stop fighting the rhythm of the mundane, and you begin to dance with it. You realize that folding the laundry is an act of deep care for your future self. You realize that cooking a simple meal is an act of love, a primal, ancient ritual of nourishing the body that carries you through the world. We spend so much time searching for meaning, as if it is a buried treasure we have to uncover on a grand adventure. But meaning is not hiding at the summit of the mountain. Meaning is hiding in the grocery store aisle on a Sunday afternoon. It is hiding in the quiet, unspoken agreement between two partners who wordlessly navigate a small kitchen together without bumping into each other. It is hiding in the act of turning off all the lights in the house before you go to sleep, knowing that you have successfully kept yourself and the people you love safe for one more day. When you strip away the cultural obsession with greatness, what you are left with is the stunning architecture of an ordinary existence. It is a quiet life, yes. It will not be written about in history books. It will not earn you a monument in a public square, but it will earn you something infinitely more valuable, an actual lived experience. You will reach the end of your life and you will not have to wonder where the time went, because you were actually awake for it. You were awake for the boiling water. You were awake for the rain hitting the windshield on the drive home. You were awake for the beautiful, boring, utterly magnificent maintenance of just being alive. So let the cinematic highlight reel burn. Let the pressure to live a spectacularly interesting life completely dissolve. You are allowed to just be a person in a room. You are allowed to find the absolute height of romance in a cup of cheap coffee and a quiet morning. You are allowed to build your home entirely out of the mundane, and you are allowed to decide that this home, this quiet, ordinary, deeply unspectacular home, is the most beautiful place in the entire world. If the architecture of an ordinary life is built out of mundane tasks, then routine is the mortar that holds those bricks together. For most of modern existence, we are taught to despise routine. We treat the word itself like a quiet insult. We use it as a synonym for stagnation, for boredom, for being trapped in a cage of predictability. We see advertisements, social media posts, and cultural narratives relentlessly pushing us to break the mold, to travel on a whim, to live without a schedule, to crave constant chaos and novelty because somehow novelty has been equated with being fully alive. We are terrified of waking up on a Tuesday and knowing exactly what the day looks like before our feet even touch the floor. We run from repetition as if it were a slow poison. We throw our lives into deliberate turmoil just to feel a spike of adrenaline, convincing ourselves that chaos is the true signature of a passionate existence. We stay up too late, we change paths too quickly, we blow up quiet, stable foundations because a part of us has been conditioned to believe that peace is inherently suspicious. But if you look closely at the things that actually sustain us, you realize how profoundly mistaken that worldview is. The human body is an absolute masterpiece of biological routine. Your heart does not wake up on a random Thursday and decide to improvise its rhythm just to keep things interesting. Your lungs do not crave novelty. They crave the steady, unbroken repetition of an inhale and an exhale. Your nervous system, your cellular structure, your circadian rhythm, every single physical mechanism that keeps you tethered to this earth is entirely dependent on predictability. When the physical body thrives on routine, why do we constantly wage war against it in our minds? The truth is, the sacred routine is not a cage. The sacred routine is a sanctuary. It is the invisible scaffolding that allows your mind to finally stop hyperventilating about the future. When you know what your day looks like, when you have established a quiet, reliable rhythm for your mornings and your evenings, you completely eliminate the crushing cognitive tax of constant decision-making. You stop wasting your precious emotional bandwidth on the trivial logistics of survival, which leaves you with an abundance of energy to actually feel, to actually create, and to actually love. Think about the quiet power of a morning that belongs entirely to you. Before the phone lights up with demands, before the inbox starts overflowing with synthetic urgency, before the world wakes up and demands to harvest your attention, there is a window of absolute, untouchable peace. A sacred routine begins in that window. It doesn't require a complex, hyper-optimized productivity protocol. It doesn't need to be tracked on an app. It can be as simple as waking up 20 minutes before anyone else in your house, walking into the kitchen in your oversized sweater, and watching the sky slowly turn from bruised purple to a soft, warm amber. It is the deliberate pacing of your movements, It is brushing your teeth without rushing, stretching your spine, and opening a window just to let the cold morning air sweep the stale, stagnant ghost out of the room. These micro rituals look completely insignificant from the outside. If someone were watching you through the window, they would see nothing remarkable. But on the inside, a microscopic miracle is taking place. You are anchoring yourself to the physical plane. You are whispering to your nervous system, you are safe. The world hasn't ended. You have time. We panic when our life feels small because we think smallness is the same thing as insignificance. We live in a culture that screams at us to expand, to scale, to reach millions of people, to leave a footprint so massive that the universe has no choice but to notice us. And in that frantic egomaniacal rush to be everywhere at once, we completely abandon the very place where we actually live. Right here, in this exact room, on this exact floor. A sacred routine brings you back to your proper scale. It reminds you that you are a localized, physical human being. You are not a global brand. You are not an algorithm. You are a soul housed in a fragile, beautiful body that requires tending. When you establish a routine, you are essentially telling the chaotic, unpredictable universe, I cannot control the stock market. I cannot control what people say about me. I cannot stop the passage of time or cure all the suffering in the world. But I can't control the way I fold this blanket. I can't control the temperature of the water in the sink. I can't control the gentleness with which I treat myself this morning. That realization is not a surrender. It is a profound reclamation of power. You stop trying to manage the entire ocean, and you finally learn how to tend your own small, beautiful garden. And the beauty of a routine is that it catches you when you fall. We all experience seasons of intense grief, burnout, or heartbreak seasons where the ground drops out from under you and the future looks like a jagged, terrifying wall of fog. In those moments, your higher cognitive functions will fail you. You won't feel like journaling, you won't feel like manifesting, and you won't feel like making grand plans to change your life. On those heavy days, your ambition cannot save you, but your routine will. Your routine will. Your routine becomes the automated floorboards beneath your feet. Even when your heart is broken into 1,000 pieces, the automatic mechanics of your routine will quietly step in. You will wake up. You will make the coffee. You will wake up, you will rise your face. You will step outside. You won't be doing it because you are inspired. You will be doing it because the muscle memory of your peace carries you through the dark. The routine holds the space for you to heal without requiring you to force the healing. We have to stop apologizing for wanting a predictable, peaceful life. We have to stop letting cultural narratives convince us that if we aren't constantly courting danger, pivoting careers, or moving to a new country every 2 years, we are somehow failing at youth or failing at adventure. True adventure is not running away from your life. True adventure is having the courage to stay inside your life and dig deep into the soil until you find the hidden springs of joy that were sitting underneath you the entire time. So let your days have shape. Let your evenings have boundaries. Design a life that does not require you to constantly recover from it. If your schedule leaves you feeling hollow, frantic, and perpetually exhausted, it is not a successful schedule, no matter how much money it generates or how impressive it looks on a resume. A successful routine is one that lets you sleep deeply, love openly, and wake up on a Tuesday morning feeling a quiet, unshakable sense of gratitude that you get to live this exact, unremarkable day all over again. That is not stagnation. That is sanctuary. And in a world that is completely losing its mind, a sanctuary is the most revolutionary thing you can possibly build. We live in a culture that is utterly obsessed with monuments. We erect massive cultural pedestals for the final products, the graduation stage, the book launch, the wedding altar, the corner office, the viral success. We throw parties for the arrivals. We pop champagne for the visible summits, and we record the exact second a long-term goal finally crosses the finish line. And because our eyes are entirely trained on the monuments, we completely overlook the quiet, invisible foundation of small, uncelebrated victories that actually made the survival of the journey possible. We do not throw parties for the days you simply decided not to break. There are mornings when getting out of bed requires a level of raw psychological courage that rivals any physical feat ever recorded in human history. You wake up and the weight of your own mind is so heavy, so dark and so suffocating that your entire physical body screams at you to pull the covers over your head and retreat entirely from the grid. The anxiety is a physical pressure in your chest, The future looks like a wall of gray ash. And yet, despite the absolute terror of the silence, you put your feet on the floor. You make the coffee. You step into the shower. You show up for a life that feels entirely too heavy to carry. No one sends you a trophy for that. There's no certificate of completion handed to you for surviving a Tuesday where you wanted to disappear. We dismiss these moments as trivial because they didn't produce a marketable output. We tell ourselves that basic maintenance doesn't count as achievement if you didn't write a chapter, if you didn't close a deal, if you didn't physically build something that can be photographed and uploaded to the internet. We treat the day as a zero, a blank space on the ledger. This is a profound and devastating error in the way we measure the human experience. The most monumental victories of your life are almost never witnessed by an audience. They happen in absolute unglamorous isolation. Think about the quiet, invisible battles you've fought over the years. Think about the exact moment you finally decided to walk away from a toxic dynamic, even though your hands were shaking and your heart was breaking because you knew a familiar hell was safer than an unknown future. Think about the night you sat across from someone you loved, realized you were speaking two entirely different languages, and chose to swallow your pride and let them misunderstand you, rather than engaging in a war that had no winners. Think about the times you forgive your younger self for making stupid, clumsy, entirely human mistakes. Those are not small victories. Those are the structural re-engineering of your entire soul. They don't come with applause. They come with a quiet, hollow apartment, a cold cup of tea, and the deep, aching silence of a room where you have to sit entirely alone with the consequences of your own growth. We need to radically expand our definition of what constitutes an achievement. If you spent an entire day resting with a heavy, paralyzing wave of depression, and the only thing you managed to accomplish was keeping yourself alive and breathing until the sun went down, that is not a wasted day. That is a massive, hard-fought victory. You defended your tiny piece of the earth against an internal storm that could have easily swept you away. We need to build monuments for the invisible resilience of ordinary people. We need to celebrate the parent who works a draining, unfulfilling job for decades just to ensure that children never have to feel the specific kind of cold poverty they grew up with, and who smiles at the kitchen table every single evening as if the exhaustion isn't slowly eating them alive. We need to celebrate the artist who spends years pouring their soul into a project that almost nobody will ever see, simply because the act of creating keeps the darkness at bay. We need to celebrate the friend who shows up for you with soup and a blank face, holding space for your grief while secretly carrying their own invisible tragedies behind their teeth. These are the quiet saints of the modern world. They do not wear capes. They wear oversized sweaters, stained aprons, and tired eyes. They move to the supermarket aisles and the traffic jams with a quiet, devastating grace, carrying mountains on their shoulders and making it look effortless because they know that no one is coming to lift the weight for them. When you learn to recognize these uncelebrated victories in your own life, your entire relationship with yourself begins to soften. You stop viewing your life through the lens of a harsh corporate auditor. You stop looking at the days you didn't produce as days you failed. You start looking at your history with a deep, radical tenderness. You look back at the hardest year of your life, the year you felt like you were slowly drowning in slow motion, and you don't judge yourself for not being productive. You look at that version of yourself with absolute awe, whispering, "I can't believe you stayed. I can't believe you kept breathing when the air was that thin." That is what true self-love looks like. It is not bubble baths and positive affirmations. It is standing in the ruins of a broken week, looking at your own tired hands and saying, "We survived," and that is enough. You do not need the world to validate your survival to make it real. The universe does not require a press release to acknowledge your courage. Every single time you choose softness in a world that is aggressively trying to make you hard, every single time you choose to heal an old wound instead of passing the pain down the line, every single time you wake up and decide to try one more time, you are winning a war that nobody else even knows is being fought. So let the world keep its monuments. Let them chase the viral moments, the massive titles, and the glittering trophies of external success. You can quietly step off the stage. You can build a small, sacred altar in your own heart for the quiet nights, the invisible tears, and the uncelebrated survivals that made you who you are. Because when the final ledger of your existence is written, it will not be the public achievements that define your soul. It will be the secret, silent courage with which you met the dark, and the gentle, stubborn grace with which you chose to stay. We have been handed a deeply broken dictionary when it comes to the definition of love. From the earliest fairy tales we are told as children, to the blockbuster movies we consume as adults, our cultural narrative around love is entirely built on the language of acquisition. We talk about love as if it were a territory to be conquered, a prize to be won, or an item to be securely locked away in a vault. We use verbs like landing someone, keeping someone, caping someone, capturing someone's heart, and securing a commitment. We treat human connection like a real estate transaction where the ultimate goal is to sign a permanent deed and put a fence around the perimeter. And because we view love through the lens of possession, we naturally begin to view the people we love as extensions of our own property. We write an invisible contract the moment we let someone into our lives. We start tracking the data. We count the text messages. We audit the response times. We measure the sacrifices, and we quietly demand a return on our emotional investment. We believe that because we offered someone our vulnerability, we have somehow purchased a share of their autonomy. We believe that loving someone gives us the right to dictate their trajectory, to manage their moods, and to demand that they stay neatly within the boundaries we have drawn for them. When they try to wander outside those boundaries, when they change their minds, when they need space, when their personal evolution begins to pull them in a direction that doesn't align perfectly with our grand life plan, we panic. We panic because we think we are losing our property. We tighten our grip. We raise our voices. We weaponize our guilt. And we fight tooth and nail to keep them exactly where they are, completely blind to the fact that the very act of holding on too tight is what is actively suffocating the connection. Think about the way a child interacts with a wild creature. If a child walks into a garden and sees a brilliant, fragile butterfly resting on a flower, their very first instinct is almost always to reach out and grab it. They want to hold it. They want to bring it closer so they can examine every detail of its beauty. But the moment the child closes their small fist around the butterfly, the magic is instantly destroyed. The wings are crushed. The dust rubs off. The life is squeezed out of the delicate body in the name of affection. The child didn't hate the butterfly. They loved it too much, but they didn't understand the fundamental rule of fragile things. Some things are simply too wild to be held. I once stood in a garden and watched a flower bloom in absolute isolation. It was stunning, vibrant, completely open, drawing its strength entirely from the soil and the sun. And I realized in that exact moment that the greatest act of love I could offer it was to leave it completely alone. I didn't need to pick it to prove that I admired it. I didn't need to pick it to prove that I admired it. I didn't need to press its petals between the pages of a heavy book to trap it in the past. Its beauty existed entirely independent of my ownership. Why is it so impossibly difficult for us to apply that exact same logic to human beings? Why do we believe that a person can only matter to us if they legally, emotionally, or geographically belong to us forever? Real love, the pure, unadulterated, deeply mature kind of love, is not about possession. It is about witnessing. It is the radical, terrifying ability to look at another human being, acknowledge the massive, beautiful complexity of their soul, and say, even if this connection does not last forever, even if your path eventually diverges from mine, I am profoundly, unreservedly grateful that I was here to witness your existence. When you love someone as presence rather than possession, the entire dynamic of the relationship shifts from a transaction to a sanctuary. You stop trying to manage them. You stop auditing their choices, trying to fix their flaws, or rewriting their history to fit your narrative. You allow them to show up as they are, messy, unfinished, contradictory, and entirely human. And more importantly, you allow them to leave. That is the ultimate test of love. Can you let someone walk away without setting fire to the bridge behind them? Can you wish them well on a path that no longer includes you, simply because their happiness matters more to your ego than your proximity to them? Most of us can't. Most of us default to bitterness, resentment, and a desperate need to prove that we were the victim, because our culture teaches us that an ending is an absolute failure. If a relationship doesn't end in a lifelong marriage or a permanent fixture, we treat the entire history of the connection as a waste of time. What a devastatingly shallow way to measure a soul. Some people do not arrive in your life to stay until the final credits roll. They arrive for a specific chapter, a specific season, a specific altitude of your emotional evolution. They are catalysts. They show up out of nowhere, holding the exact mirror you needed to look into, teaching you how deeply you are capable of feeling, breaking open the hard, cynical shell around your heart and showing you parts of yourself you didn't even know existed. And once their work in your life is complete, once the lesson is integrated, once the chapter is written, they gently, inevitably begin to drift away. And when they drift, our instinct is to scream, to bargain, to chain them to the radiator of our expectations. We fail to realize that trying to force someone to stay past their expiration date is the fastest way to turn a sacred memory into a toxic ghost. The tighter you squeeze the fist, the faster the sand slips through your fingers. Imagine letting go instead. Imagine looking at someone who is outgrowing your shed space, taking a deep breath, and choosing to honor the beauty of what you shed by setting them free. Imagine being able to say, "Thank you for the person you helped me become. I release you from the obligation of being my forever." It takes an immense, breathtaking amount of maturity to reach that level of grace. It requires you to decouple your self-worth from your relationship status. It requires you to trust that a connection does not need to be permanent to be profoundly meaningful. A song does not need to play forever for it to be a masterpiece. A sunset does not need to linger in the sky for 6 hours for it to completely take your breath away. That temporary nature is precisely what gives them their sacred weight. When you stop treating people like property, you stop experiencing the agonizing terror of loss. You realize that no one ever truly belongs to you. We are all just temporary custodians of each other's hearts, passing through each other's lives like travelers at a station, sharing a bench, a conversation, and a warm cup of coffee before the train arrives, and we must each board our separate cars. You do not own the air you breathe. You do not own the sunlight that streams through your window in the morning. You simply experience them. You appreciate them deeply while they are present, and you let them pass through without trying to bottle them up. Apply that exact same openness to the people you love. Let them be free. Let them change their minds. Let them have dreams that don't involve you. Let them stumble. Let them grow. And let them walk away if the road requires it. Because if someone has to be trapped, manipulated, or guilt-tripped into staying in your life, you do not have a relationship. You have a hostage situation. And true love, the kind of love that actually heals the deep, quiet fractures in the human spirit, only thrives in wide open spaces. It requires oxygen. It requires the absolute unyielding freedom of two sovereign souls choosing to sit next to each other on a bench, not because they are chained there, but because out of all the infinite paths in the universe, they simply enjoy the view together for a little while. And when the time comes to stand up and walk in different directions, you don't curse the bench. You don't burn the station down. You smile, you wave goodbye, and you carry the fingerprint of the soul with you into the next chapter. Entirely grateful that for a brief, beautiful moment in the vast, chaotic expanse of the cosmos, your frequencies happen to align. We spend the vast majority of our lives staring directly through the present moment, completely blind to the microscopic texture of the world that is happening right beneath our feet. Our consciousness is almost entirely temporal time travelers. We spend our mornings replaying conversations from 3 years ago, dissecting what we should have said, auditing our past mistakes and wishing we could rewrite the script. We spend our afternoons projecting ourselves 5 years into the future, frantically trying to engineer outcomes, solve problems that haven't happened yet, and build fortresses against an imaginary tomorrow. We are constantly living everywhere except where our bodies are physically located. And because our eyes are permanently locked on the distant horizon searching for the next massive milestone, the next crisis to manage, or the next phantom to chase, we miss the entire substance of our existence. We miss the art of noticing. To notice is an act of radical, quiet rebellion against a world that demands your distraction. It is the conscious, deliberate decision to pull your wandering mind out of the past and out of the future and slam it down hard into the exact coordinate of right now. It sounds simple. Anyone can look at a wall. Anyone can walk down the street and see cars driving by. But seeing is not the same as noticing. Seeing is passive. Seeing is just the biological processing of light hitting your retinas. Noticing is active. Noticing is an emotional and spiritual awakening. It is the moment you stop treating your environment like a blank background and start recognizing it as a living, breathing work of art. Try it right now. Pause for a single uninterrupted second. Look up from the screen. Look at the room you're sitting in. Do not just glance at it to make sure nothing is on fire. Actually look at it. Notice the way the light falls across the floorboards. Notice the slight, imperfect dust mote suspended in that shaft of sunlight, drifting aimlessly through the air with absolute unbothered freedom. Notice the texture of the wall nearest to you, the tiny, microscopic bumps in the paint, the faint shadow cast by a piece of furniture, the history of a life lived inside these four walls. Notice the soundscape beneath the silence. There's always a sound if you drop down deep enough. The low structural hum of the refrigerator, the distant muffled rumble of traffic 3 streets over, the steady rhythmic expansion and contraction of your own chest, pulling cool air into your lungs and releasing it back into the room. None of these details are grand. None of them will make the evening news. None of them will help you climb the corporate ladder or optimize your productivity metrics. They are entirely beautifully ordinary, and yet they are the only things that are actually real. We wait for cinematic moments to feel alive. We think we need a dramatic cross-country road trip, a life-altering heartbreak, a wedding, or a funeral to finally wake up our senses. We treat our normal, everyday lives like a black and white preamble, waiting for the color to finally turn on when the real adventure begins. But the color is already on. You are just wearing sunglasses indoors. You are wearing the heavy, opaque glasses of constant anxiety, future tripping, and perfectionism. And those glasses filter out 99% of the microscopic beauty that is happening right in front of you. When you practice the art of noticing, you realize that magic is not hidden in some distant, mystical dimension. Magic is just ordinary life. Observe closely. Think about the way a friend laughs. Not a polite, algorithmic laugh, but a real, unguarded, head-thrown-back laugh with their eyes completely closed and they lose their breath for a second. If you catch that moment, if you actually notice the pure, unfiltered joy radiating off their face, it will anchor you to them in a way that 1,000 text messages never could. Think about the way the air smells right before it rains, that sharp electric scent of ozone and wet pavement. It is a sensory trigger that has existed for millions of years, connecting you directly to the ancient biological rhythm of the planet. Think about the precise feeling of relief when you finally take off heavy, pinching shoes at the end of a grueling day and let your bare feet touch the cool floorboards. These are the microcurrencies of a well-lived life. They don't cost any money. They don't require an itinerary. They don't demand that you achieve anything, prove anything, or climb anywhere. They are completely free. And they are completely abundant. Yet we walk right past them every single day, our eyes glued to our glowing little rectangle screens, our minds miles away, worrying about things that will likely never happen. We are like ghosts haunting our own existence, starving to death in the middle of a massive, overflowing banquet because we refuse to sit down at the table and taste the food. When you learn how to notice, grief changes its shape too. You stop looking at the passage of time as a thief that is stealing your life away, and you start looking at it as an artist that is adding patina to your world. You notice the way an old book has softened at the corners from being read 12 times. You notice the way a scar on your hand reminds you of a lesson you had to learn the hard way. You notice the gentle, softening lines around your parents' eyes. And instead of feeling panic, you feel this overwhelming, fragile wave of gratitude that you get to witness them aging, that you get to share this fleeting, beautiful blink of an eye on Earth with them. Noticing brings a profound, staggering depth to your capacity for empathy. When you start paying attention to the small details of the world, you stop seeing strangers as obstacles. You notice the tired slouch of the person standing behind you in the grocery line. You notice the way a stray cat carefully picks his way across a wall. You notice the quiet dignity of an old man sitting on a park bench, feeding crumbs to pigeons with absolute unhurried patience. You realize that everyone around you is fighting a silent, beautiful, desperate battle to feel seen, feel safe, and to find a tiny pocket of peace in a chaotic universe. And that realization makes it infinitely harder to be cruel. It makes it infinitely harder to rush, to judge, or to hold on to petty resentments. You begin to realize that life is not a grand, sweeping, epic novel. Life is a short story collection made entirely of flash fiction. It is a mosaic built out of 10,000 tiny, fragile, glowing tiles. If you spend all your time waiting for the final chapter, you will miss the brilliant, iridescent color of the individual tiles right beneath your feet. So slow down Lower your gaze from the distant mountains. Step off the highway of your ambition. Find one small, completely unremarkable thing in your immediate vicinity right now. Look at it as if you were an alien visiting this planet for the very first time, seeing it with completely fresh eyes, entirely unburdened by utility or expectation. Notice the color, notice the shadow, notice the life pulsating inside it, because in the end, you will not measure the richness of your time on earth by the titles you held, the money you accumulated, or the mountains you conquered. You will measure it by the sunsets you actually stopped to watch, the quiet mornings you actually tasted, the ordinary breathtaking moments you were awake enough, still enough, and soft enough to fully, deeply notice. There comes a moment in every quiet life when you have to walk back through the ruins of your own history and clear out the things you were never meant to keep. We are natural pack rats of the spirit. We collect our old versions the way children collect smooth stones on a beach, tucking them away in the pockets of our memory, convinced that we might need them again someday. We keep the ghost of the angry teenager we used to be, holding on to old grievances, like legal deeds. We keep the ghost of the broken-hearted 20-year-old, replaying old arguments as if a different punchline will somehow magically change the outcome. We keep the phantom roommates, the unlived lives, the missed opportunities, and the abandoned ambitions, crowding our internal house until there is literally no room left to breathe. And then, one day, you wake up and realize that the house is too heavy. The floors are sagging under the weight of all those phantoms. You are spending 90% of your emotional energy just managing the ghosts of your past, leaving absolutely nothing left for the person you actually are right now. It is time to hold a funeral. Not a tragic, tear-soaked funeral where you mourn the loss of what could have been, but a quiet, deeply respectful ceremony of release, acknowledging that something served its purpose, thanked it for the education, and gently laying it to rest. We are so afraid of finality. We think that letting go of a past version of ourselves means erasing our history, as if admitting that a chapter is over invalidates the ink we used to write it. But closing a book is not destroying it. Closing a book is simply honoring the fact that the story has reached its natural conclusion, and it is time to turn the page. Think about the person you were 5 years ago. That version of you made mistakes that still make your cheeks burn when you think about them at 3 in the morning. They trusted the wrong people. They stayed in situations they should have fled from on day one. They handled things with a clumsy, defensive desperation born entirely out of fear. If you met that past version of yourself on the street today, your first instinct might be to judge them. You'd want to grab them by the shoulders and shake some sense into them. You'd want to hand them a list of all the things they are going to ruin because they don't know any better yet. But that version of you was doing the absolute best they could with the broken tools they had at the time. They didn't have your wisdom. They didn't have your scars. They were wandering through the dark, blindly trying to find a passion warmth, and they used whatever raw materials were available to keep themselves alive. To hold on to anger toward your past self is like screaming at a toddler for falling down while they are learning how to walk. You have to forgive them. You have to look at the ghost of that younger, clumsy, terrified person, put your hand on their shoulder and say, "Thank you. Thank you for taking the hits. Thank you for making the mistakes, for breaking the heart, for surviving the fire. Because of your clumsy navigation, I am standing here today with a soft heart and clear eyes. You can rest now. I've got it from you." The moment you offer that forgiveness, the ghost changes shape. Instead of a looming, terrifying reminder of your failures, it dissolves into quiet wisdom. It becomes part of the foundation. It stops haunting you and starts supporting you. And it isn't just past versions of yourself that need laying to rest. It is the unlived life too. It is the phantom careers, the alternate cities, the roads not taken. We carry around the heavy luggage of our unrealized potential, like a backpack full of bricks, constantly apologizing to the universe because we didn't turn out to be the prodigy everyone thought we were going to be. Imagine taking that backpack off. Imagine walking out to the edge of an open field, sitting down in the grass and unzipping the heavy canvas. Imagine pulling out every single what if, every single unwritten book, every unwritten list track, every single ghost of an ambition that you never actually pursued. Look at them in the daylight. Acknowledge how beautiful they looked when they were just ideas in your head. And then, One by one, let the wind take them. You don't need them anymore. You don't need the comforting illusion of infinite potential to validate your existence, because you have something infinitely more valuable, actual breathing reality, when the field is finally clear of the ghosts, when the phantoms have faded, when the past versions have been thanked and put to bed, when the unlived lives have dissolved into the earth. Look around at the space that is left. It feels vast, doesn't it? It feels a little bit scary too. For a second, without the noise or the ghosts, the silence is overwhelming. You realize that there's nothing left to argue with. There is no one left to blame. There is no alternate timeline to escape into when the present moment gets a little too heavy. There is just you, here, now. And that is the exact moment the healing truly begins. When you stop haunting your own life, you finally become fully present for it. You stop living like a tenant in your own skin, waiting for the real owner to come back and take over. You realize that you are the owner. The house belongs to you. The floorboards are yours. The quiet kitchen, the unwashed dishes, the messy, beautiful, completely ordinary, routine it is all yours. So let the dead bury the dead. Let the ghosts dissolve. Take a deep breath of the clean, uncrowded air in your own mind and step forward into a house that is finally, wonderfully, completely your own. There is a quiet, persistent hum of anxiety that lives just beneath the skin of modern life, whispering a single, terrifying sentence on an endless loop. You are running out of time. It tells us that we are off schedule. It convinces us that there is a master clock ticking somewhere in the center of the universe, keeping score of our achievements, our relationships, and our milestones, and that we are currently falling behind the pace. We look at our lives at 20, at 30, at 40, or beyond, and we calculate the gap between where we are and where we think we should be, and our chests tighten with the suffocating panic of lateness. We act as though life is a race with a strict cutoff time. We live with this frantic urgency, as if an invisible referee is standing at the finish line holding a stopwatch, ready to blow the whistle and declare us failures because we didn't sprint fast enough. But I need you to listen to this and let it sink all the way down into your bones. You cannot be behind in a life that belongs exclusively to you. The very concept of being behind implies that there's a universal track, a standardized checklist, and a singular, correct timeline that every human being on Earth is supposed to follow. But the track is an illusion. The checklist was written by a society that values mass production over human well-being. There is no standard pace for human soul. Look at the natural world, the only system that operates without the interference of human anxiety. Look at the trees, the rivers, the changing seasons. A river does not look at a waterfall in panic because it hasn't fallen yet. A seed does not break through the soil and look at the giant oak tree next to it with shame because it is still just a sprout. Nature understands an ancient, unyielding truth that we spend our entire lives trying to unlearn. Everything unfolds in its own exact season. Why do we afford so much grace to the earth, but demand mechanical synchronization from ourselves? You have survived things that no timeline could have accounted for. You have carried private griefs, navigated invisible storms, healed from wounds that left no physical scars, and spent years simply trying to figure out how to keep your heart soft in a world that kept trying to harden it. That is not wasted time. That is calibration. The detours you took, the jobs that didn't work out, the relationships that broke your heart. The years you spent feeling completely lost and unmoored were not wrong turns. They were the crucible. They were the slow, necessary process of stripping away your ego, breaking down your illusions, and teaching you how to stand entirely on your own 2 feet. If you had arrived at your current destination 5 years earlier, you wouldn't have had the depth to sustain it. 5 years earlier, you wouldn't have had the depth to sustain it. You wouldn't have had the wisdom to appreciate it, the patience to maintain it, or the resilience to survive its inevitable friction. The delay was the protection. When you finally realize this, the toxic urgency of the timeline simply evaporates. You stop looking at birthdays as deadlines. You stop looking at other people's chapters as a commentary on your own book. You realize that some people bloom in their 20s, some bloom in their 30s, and some spend decades quietly building deep, invisible roots before they ever show a single leaf above the soil. All of them are valid. All of them are part of the garden. You are not late. You're not missing out. You're not failing an exam that only exists in your own head. You are right on time. The exact seconds you have spent wandering, resting, falling, and getting back up were the exact seconds required to forge the person reading these words right now. So drop the stopwatch, close the ledger, step off the imaginary track, take a deep, full breath of the present moment, and look at the path behind you with radical, unconditional kindness. You made it here, and the road ahead is entirely open, completely unhurried, and waiting for you to walk it at the exact, beautiful pace of your own heartbeat. It is remarkably easy to spend your entire life at war with reality. We wage a relentless, exhausting battle against the facts of our existence. We argue with the past, wishing we had made different choices on a Tuesday 5 years ago. We argue with the present, resenting the traffic, the messy kitchen, the fatigue in our bones, and the fact that things didn't turn out quite the way the fairy tales promised. We argue with the future, losing sleep over probabilities that haven't happened yet and may never occur. We treat reality like a rough draft that we are constantly trying to erase and rewrite. We look at our flawed, complicated lives and think, if I just push a little harder, if I just worry a little more, if I just refuse to accept this, I can force the universe to hand me a different script. And so we exhaust ourselves. We throw our weight against the immutable walls of what is, losing our shoulders and bleeding our energy into the void. We think that fighting reality is a sign of ambition. We think that refusing to accept things as they are is proof of our drive, our passion, and our refusal to settle. But true maturity, the quiet, hard-won peace that comes from finally laying down your weapons, begins with the terrifying radical act, acceptance. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It does not mean you are surrendering your agency, giving up on your dreams, or saying that everything that happened to you was good or fair. Acceptance simply means dropping the boxing gloves. It is the moment you look at the unedited, messy, entirely imperfect reality of your life right now, and you stop screaming at it. You look at the heartbreak, the detours, the unmet expectations, the ordinary furniture of your days, and you say, okay, this is where I am. This is what is true. There is an astonishing, paradoxical release of power that happens the exact second you stop fighting the truth. When you fight reality, you give it immense power over you. Every time you resist a fact, you anchor yourself to its pain. But the moment you accept it, the moment you stop trying to convince the universe that today should have been different, the fiction instantly disappears. The energy you are wasting on endless bitter resistance suddenly floods back into your system, and you realize, with a shock of profound clarity, that you now have all the bandwidth you need to actually deal with the present moment. It takes infinitely more courage to accept an ordinary, flawed life than it does to endlessly chase an imaginary, perfect one. Chasing perfection is easy. It requires no grounding, no vulnerability, and no accountability, because the perfect fantasy can never actually be tested by reality. It lives safely in the clouds. Accepting reality requires you to step out of the clouds and walk barefoot onto the hard, cool earth. It requires you to look at your unfulfilled ambitions, your broken relationships, your physical limitations, and your quiet, unremarkable routines and love them anyway. It means looking at the person in the mirror, the one with the tired eyes, the unpolished edges, and the history of clumsy mistakes, and saying, I forgive you for not being a movie star. I forgive you for just being human. You are enough. When you accept your life, you stop treating your existence like a waiting room for a better future. You stop waiting for the conditions to be just right before you allow yourself to be happy. You realize that happiness is not a reward delivered at the end of a successful struggle. Happiness is the quiet, radical decision to make peace with the exact ground you are standing on right now. The storm might still be raging outside. The bills might still be waiting on the counter. The future might still be a dense, unreadable wall of fog. But inside your own mind, the war is over. You have laid down your weapons. You have stopped fighting the universe, and in doing so, you have finally allowed the universe to hold you. Chapter 18, The Soft Existence. For most of our lives, we are handed a very heavy, very specific kind of armor. We are taught that the world is a battlefield, that existence is a competitive sport, and that if we want to survive, let alone thrive, we must harden ourselves against the elements. We build thick, impenetrable walls around our hearts, We wrap ourselves in the heavy iron of constant defense, cynicism, and relentless ambition. We learn to meet vulnerability with suspicion, to treat rest as a tactical weakness, and to carry our exhaustion like a badge of honor, proving to anyone who will look that we are tough enough to take whatever the universe throws at us. We walk through our days braced for impact. We anticipate the betrayal. We steel ourselves against a failure. And we refuse to let our guard down because we are terrified that if we soften for even a single second, the crushing weight of the world will rush in and break us. And for a long time, the armor works. It keeps you safe. It protects you from the sharpest edges of disappointment. It allows you to function in systems that were never designed to care about your well-being. Isomorphisms of survival. But eventually you reach a point where you realize the tragic paradox of the armor. The exact same heavy iron plates that keep the pain out are also keeping the joy out. You cannot selectively numb your human experience. You cannot build a wall thick enough to block out heartbreak, anxiety, and rejection, while somehow leaving a wide open window for love, awe, tenderness, and profound peace to waltz right on in. When you armor your heart against the dark, you simultaneously plunge yourself into a gray, muted twilight. You go through the motions of living, but you feel everything through a thick, rubberized glove. You are safe, yes, but you are also profoundly agonizingly lonely. This is where the soul begins to quietly rebel against its own protection. It happens in a quiet moment, perhaps when you are sitting alone in your room, or watching the rain streak down the window, or holding the hand of someone you love. You realize that you are simply too tired to carry the weight of the iron anymore. Your shoulders ache from the posture of defense. Your arms are exhausted from holding the shield up against a world that was never actually trying to destroy you, but was simply asking you to feel, and so you decide to lay the armor down. This is the birth of the soft existence. Choosing to live softly in a harsh, aggressive world is not a sign of weakness. It is the most radical, breathtaking act of courage a human being can possibly undertake. It means deciding that you would rather risk getting hurt than spend another day feeling entirely numb. It means choosing to walk through the world with your chest completely unshielded, your hands empty, and your heart fully exposed to the elements. When you live softly, your entire relationship with the world transforms. You stop treating interactions as transactions or negotiations. You stop walking into rooms looking for the power dynamic, scanning for threats, or trying to control how people perceive you. You let people misunderstand you. You let them misjudge you. You stop scrambling to defend your character every time someone fails to see your worth, because you realize that your worth does not depend on their approval. You become like water. Water does not fight the rock. Water does not build armor to crush the obstacle in its path. Water is soft, yielding, and fluid, yet over time, through sheer persistence and unyielding gentleness, water carves right through the hardest stone on earth. When you live softly, you stop forcing your life to bend to your absolute will. You learn the ancient, forgotten art of yielding. If a heavy wind blows, you don't snap like a rigid, stubborn oak branch. You bend like the long grass in the meadow, letting the storm pass completely over you, before you rise back up to greet the sun. You start treating your own heart with an immense, revolutionary tenderness when you make a mistake. When you stumble, or fail, or fall back into an old familiar pattern, you don't instantly reach for the whip. You don't berate yourself with harsh words and cruel internal audits. You place a hand over your chest, take a deep breath, and say to yourself what you would say to a frightened child. It's okay, you're human, we'll try again tomorrow. You start extending that exact same softness to the people around you. You realize that everyone you encounter, even the difficult, loud, defensive people, is just walking around in their own heavy armor, terrified and bruised, secretly longing for a safe place to put their shields down. Instead of meeting their anger with more anger, or their cynicism with cold detachment, you respond with a disarming, radical grace. You realize that you no longer have anything to prove to anyone. You don't need to conquer the world. You don't need to leave a massive, towering monument with your name carved into it. You don't need to be extraordinary, wealthy, or globally celebrated to justify the space you take up on this earth. You just need to live. You need to eat good food with people who make you laugh until your stomach hurts. You need to read books by a sunlit window. You need to walk outside, feel the cool air hit your face, and let the beauty of a simple afternoon completely undo you. there is an incredible, profound strength in being soft. An iron sword can cut through flesh, but it cannot heal a wound. A stone wall can block a path, but it cannot offer shelter from the cold. Only soft things can hold life. Only soft soil can nurture a seed. Only a soft, open heart can truly experience the staggering, beautiful depth of what it means to be alive. So let the armor fall. Let the heavy iron plates drop away from your shoulders and crash to the floor. Let the noise fade. Let the defenses dissolve into the dust. Take a deep breath, stretch your arms wide, and step out into the world completely unshielded. Yes, the wind might be cold sometimes. Yes, the road might occasionally bruise your feet. But you will feel the sun on your bare skin for the very first time, and you will finally understand that the softest things in the universe are always, without exception, the things that endure. Chapter 19, the final sign-off. There is a particular kind of quiet that arrives only when you stop fighting the room. If you sit very still right now, wherever you are, whatever hour of the day or night it happens to be, and you let go of the invisible tether pulling you toward the next task, the next worry, or the next destination, the atmosphere around you changes. The frantic hum of the world seems to back away, retreating to the other side of the glass, leaving a wide open clearing of absolute silence. For so long, we treat life like an ongoing emergency. We live with our shoulders permanently hitched toward our ears, our breath shallow and trapped in our chests, waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next deadline to loom, or the next failure to punish us. We move through our days as if we are permanently late for a train that left the station hours ago. And because we live in that state of chronic emergency, we completely forget how to do the one thing we were actually designed to do: arrive. We forget that we are allowed to stop running. Look around the room we are in right now. You don't need to jump up to clean it. You don't need to reorganize it to make it look worthy of an audience. Just look at it with the unfiltered, uncritical eyes of a traveler who has finally walked through the front door after a very long, very exhausting journey. Notice the ordinary, beautiful objects that quietly hold space for your existence. The corner of the rug that curls up slightly because of 1,000 footsteps. The mug sitting on the table, still holding the faint ghost of warmth from your morning coffee. The way the shadows lengthen across the floorboards as the day slowly breathes its final soft sighs into the evening. These are not insignificant details. This is the entire architecture of your home. This is the stage upon which the singular, unrepeatable miracle of your consciousness is currently playing out. We spend so much of our brief, fragile time on this earth wishing we were somewhere else, someone else, or carrying something more impressive. We sacrifice our actual breathing present on the altar of an imaginary future that is always receding, just out of reach. We let the ghosts of our unlived lives, the weight of our unrealized potential, and the ticking of a completely fabricated societal timeline crowd us out of our own kitchen. We make ourselves strangers in our own skin. It is time to come home. It is time to walk back to the front door of your own mind. Take off your heavy boots, drop the luggage of your ambitions on the floor, and look around at the messy, beautiful, perfectly ordinary life you have actually built. You didn't become a billionaire life you have actually built. You didn't become a billionaire. You didn't cure a disease or leave your name carved into the history books. You didn't conquer the world. And as you stand here in the quiet light, you realize with a sudden, overwhelming wave of grace that none of those things ever mattered in the first place. What matters is that you survived. What matters is that you learn how to love through the heartbreak, how to find light in the dark, and how to forgive yourself for being profoundly, beautifully, clumsily human. What matters is that you woke up this morning, breathed the air, and decided to try one more time. That is not a consolation prize. That is the entire victory. The phantom roommates can finally pack their bags and vanish into the walls. The societal clock can tick its empty rhythm out in the cold street where it belongs. The heavy crown of your potential can rest forever in the dust, completely unmissed and entirely unmourned. You are no longer a project to be optimized. You are no longer a resume to be built, a standard to be met, or a race to be won. You are just a person, sitting in a quiet room, breathing in and breathing out, And right here, in this exact coordinate of time and space, with all of your unpolished edges, your unhealed scars, and your quiet, ordinary joys, everything is completely, perfectly okay. You don't need to fix anything right now. You don't need to figure out next week, next year, or who you are going to be when the leaves change color again. You only need to inhabit this single breathtaking second. Let the breath leave your lungs in a long, slow sigh. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let the tension drain out of your hands, your jaw, and the base of your skull. Feel the solid, unyielding floor beneath your feet, holding you up without asking for anything in return. Feel the vast open space of the room wrapping around you like an old familiar sweater. You made it. Through the storms, through the detours, through the long, lonely nights when you weren't sure if you had the strength to see the morning light. You made it right here, to this exact quiet moment. Take one final deep breath. Look around the room one last time. Smile at the ghosts, thank them for trying to protect you, and gently lock the door behind them. Turn off the lights of your anxiety. Sit down in the deep velvet dark of the present moment. And let the rest of the world keep spinning on its axis without you. You are done running. You are finally, beautifully, completely